Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I was coming back from my cousin Dylan's place in Gila Bend. He just had his second kid, and I drove down from Flagstaff for the weekend to help build a swing set. Stayed longer than I meant to, and by the time I got on the road Sunday night, it was pushing midnight. Highway 85 heading north is dead that time of night. Just straight blacktop through desert scrub, the occasional gas station, a few ranch signs half lit by busted bulbs. I had a cooler in the passenger seat, leftover barbecue, a bag of ice melting into the carpet. I figured I'd get home around 3 a.m., sleep a few hours, then head into work like a zombie. About 40 minutes out, I lost the radio. One second I was listening to some AM talk guy rambling about forest management, then it just cut. No static, just silence. I fiddled with the dial but couldn't get anything. Even the FM stations were just dead air. Didn't think much of it. That stretch of highway is known for spotty reception. I rolled down the window to stay awake and kept going. It was around the Palo Verde turnoff that I started noticing the headlights. I saw a car coming up ahead, just a faint glow over the horizon. As it got closer, the lights looked normal, a pair of bright whites, maybe high beams. But the second it passed me, the headlights just blinked out. Not like they turned a corner or dipped below a hill. They vanished mid-motion like someone flipped a switch. I checked my rear view and saw nothing. Pitch black, no taillights, no engine noise fading behind me, just me and the road again. It happened again about 10 minutes later. This time it was a pickup, big rig tires, lifted body. Same deal, lights on, then off the instant it passed, and then nothing behind me. I slowed down a bit. My hands started to sweat. I told myself maybe it was glare, or maybe the headlights were angled weird, and I just wasn't catching the reflection. I even convinced myself for a minute that it was a trick of the desert air, heat waves or something, but it was after midnight and the air was cool. The third one was what made me pull over. It was a white sedan, maybe an older Camry. It passed, going a little fast, and I saw a woman in the driver's seat. Blonde, head straight forward, not looking at me. She had both hands on the wheel. Her eyes didn't move, she didn't blink, and then, same as before, headlights gone, car gone. Nothing behind me. I pulled off onto the gravel shoulder, shut the engine off, and just sat there. No music, no wind, no bugs. Even the air felt still. I checked my phone. No bars. The time said 1:12 a.m. That's the last thing I remember. I didn't fall asleep. I wasn't tired. I remember gripping the steering wheel, hard, just watching the dark stretch of road ahead of me. Then I blinked and I was pulling into my driveway. It was 3:26 a.m. The driveway lights came on like normal, motion sensor floodlights I put in last winter. The ice in the cooler was long gone, and the barbecue smelled sour. My mouth was dry. I had this pounding headache like I'd just come off a plane. Ears ringing, the works. I sat there in the car for a while, trying to piece together what happened. I'd driven the whole way back, apparently. The odometer showed the right number of miles. My gas tank was lower, but I don't remember any of it. Not a single thing between pulling over and pulling in. When I checked my phone, I had one new voicemail. It was from me. The timestamp said 2:17 a.m. I don't know how that's possible. I hadn't touched my phone. I don't even use voice memos, much less leave myself voicemails. But there it was. I hit play and held it to my ear. It was static. Not full white noise, more like that pulsing kind you get between stations on a weak radio. For the first few seconds, it was just that soft, distant static. Then there was something else under it, a kind of wet, clicking sound. Faint, irregular, almost like someone tapping on glass underwater. Then I heard breathing, not mine. Slow, heavy, like someone asleep but close to the mic. The static pulsed around it, rising and falling. Every few seconds, there was a sharp little feedback squeal, like the mic was being brushed or jostled. Then, about 20 seconds in, I heard myself. But it didn't sound right. My voice was slow, like it had been dragged down a few pitches. I said something, but it was so warped I couldn't make it out. Just a few slurred syllables. Then silence again. Then, clear as day, my voice said, "They're not gone." That's it. The message ended. I played it again. Same thing. I held it to my ear until the screen dimmed. I couldn't tell if the voice was really mine or just close. The way it said that last line, it didn't sound scared, just flat, like it was stating a fact. I brought the phone inside, tried to see if it had been recording anything else, like a voice memo or an accidental video. There was nothing. No new files, no outgoing calls. I looked in the recent call log and the only outgoing number was mine, from my number to my own voicemail. While I was supposedly driving, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the windows, expecting to see headlights in the street or someone standing on the lawn, but there was nothing, just the usual early morning dark. The next day, I went out to the car and opened the hood, just to look. I don't know what I expected to find. Everything looked normal. No dents, no scratches, nothing burned or out of place. But the driver's side door had scuff marks around the handle. Long, thin smudges, like something had gripped it with greasy fingers. I wiped them off. Didn't tell anyone about it. That whole week, I kept waking up around 3 a.m., no reason. Just bolt upright in bed, heart racing. A couple nights, I swore I heard something moving on the roof. But when I'd go out with a flashlight, nothing was there. No raccoons, no branches, no footprints in the dirt. I tried calling my voicemail from a landline to see if the message would play the same. It did. Same warped breathing, same words. They're not gone. I saved the recording to my computer, then played it in a sound editor, thinking maybe I could clean it up or slow it down. When I zoomed in on the waveform, there were these weird breaks, tiny gaps that didn't look like background noise. Almost like something was embedded in the static. I don't know. Could have just been compression artifacts. I deleted it after a week. It felt wrong having it saved. Haven't heard or seen anything since then. But I won't drive that stretch of highway anymore. If I visit Dylan, I take the long way. Adds an hour, but I don't care. Whatever happened that night, whatever I remember, I think part of me doesn't want to remember it. I still don't know how I made it home. I only know I didn't do it alone. I was flying a solo night leg from Reno to Elko, doing some mountain time in a rented Cessna 172 for my commercial hours. This was back in 2019. Weather was clean, light winds, no storms anywhere on the radar. I filed IFR just to keep things structured, even though visibility was perfect. There's not much out there once you get past Fallon, just dark desert, some lonely ridgelines, a lot of nothing. It was supposed to be a 2-hour flight, give or take. I'd done the route twice before, so I knew the terrain pretty well. I topped off the tanks at Reno Stead, checked the sectional one last time, and took off around 8:40 p.m. I had the plane trimmed and level by 8,500 feet, autopilot set, and I was just monitoring things, talking to NorCal Center, sipping lukewarm gas station coffee. About halfway through, somewhere near Austin, middle of nowhere, I noticed something off to the left. Just a glow at first. I thought it was a ranch light or maybe another plane, but it was too low and too steady. Just a round white light pacing me at about my 10 o'clock, maybe a quarter mile out. It kept exact distance, same altitude. No nav lights, no strobe, no transponder blip. I double-checked traffic with Center, and they confirmed I was the only target in that airspace. I asked them if they saw anything on secondary radar. They didn't. Just me. I kept watching the light. It didn't waver or change shape. It didn't move closer or pull away. It just stayed there. Same position. No sound, though with engine noise and headsets on, I wouldn't have heard much anyway. After maybe 3 or 4 minutes, it blinked out. Just gone. No fade. No streak. Just not there anymore. I figured maybe I was seeing things. Tired eyes, reflection off the windshield, something mundane. I took a few deep breaths, scanned my instruments again. Everything looked fine. But then, maybe 5 minutes later, it came back. Same spot, same distance. This time there were 2 of them. One at 10 o'clock, one at 2. I watched them for a while, trying to come up with an explanation. I even dipped the wings slightly to see if the lights would shift, like maybe they were reflections or something. They didn't budge. They weren't reflections. They were outside, holding position like they were tethered to me. I asked Center again if they had anything visual. They didn't. But then I noticed something stranger. The radio was quiet. Too quiet. Normally on Center Freaks, even if you're not talking, you hear other pilots getting handoffs, calls, clearances, but it was dead. Just soft static, like someone had turned down the world. I checked the volume, squelch, even switched to another frequency. Nothing. Not even an ATIS broadcast. I tried my phone. No bars, not even emergency call mode, just the no service banner, which was odd. I'd had 2 bars earlier. At that point, I started to feel off, like I was too aware of the silence. My hands felt slow, like they were moving through syrup. My headset felt tighter than usual, like the pressure was building inside the cabin. And then the lights started to move. They didn't bank or turn, they just shifted. Instant relocation. 1 second they were at my sides, next second they were behind me. Still pacing, same speed, but now they were pulsing slightly. White to a pale bluish green, then back to white. No pattern, just irregular pulses, like breathing. I remember reaching for the throttle out of instinct, but I wasn't even sure what I was going to do. Outrun them? Then everything cut out. Not the engine. That kept running, but everything else. My headset went dead. Panel lights gone, radio's blank, even the transponder. No warning, no flicker, just total electrical silence. I should have declared an emergency, but I didn't even have power to squawk 7600. I was just flying blind. I didn't panic. I remember that clearly. It was more like my brain just locked into neutral. I kept flying, kept the wings level, but everything around me felt wrong. Like the air was thicker. Like time had slowed down. There was a moment, maybe just a second, maybe longer, where the lights behind me moved forward again. They passed along each side, so close I could see the glow reflecting off my wing struts. No noise, no turbulence. They just slid by and stopped ahead of me, one to the left, one to the right, same distance as before. Then I was talking to Center again. Their voice cut in mid-sentence like a radio picking up signal after a blackout. I didn't even realize I was holding the PTT switch. Sierra 329er, do you copy? I was back on frequency. Panel lights were on, transponder flashing, GPS tracking again. I looked around. The lights were gone. I checked the time. I don't know how I noticed it right away, but something didn't line up. It was 10:17 p.m. That doesn't sound strange unless you know the route. But when I looked at my GPS, I was 40 miles southeast of where I should have been. Almost on top of Ely, not Elko. The heading was wrong. I hadn't touched it. Center asked me to verify position and heading. I told them what I was seeing. They didn't comment, just gave me vectors to get back on course. I followed them without saying much. Landed in Elko around 10:45. When I got out of the plane, I was shaking. My legs felt weak. Not adrenaline, exactly. More like I hadn't used them in a while. I did a walk around, no damage, nothing out of place. But the wingtips looked cleaner, like someone had wiped them down. I mentioned it to the FBO guy just in passing. He said it had been dusty earlier in the day from the wind. All the other planes on the ramp had grit on them. Mine didn't. I didn't report it officially. I logged the flight as normal, just noted the deviation in course, and made a vague note about instrument error. But I know I didn't change heading. There's no way I ended up 40 miles off course in straight and level flight without realizing it. And there's no way 7 minutes of radio silence accounts for that much drift. I still fly. A lot, actually. I like being up there. But I don't do night flights alone anymore. And I don't fly that corridor unless I absolutely have to. Because sometimes when I'm high over the desert, I still catch myself glancing to the left. Just in case something's there. I was camped out alone near the Lake Jocassee up in the Blue Ridge foothills. I'd been hiking all day and pitched my tent around dusk just off one of the side trails. Nothing official, but there was a decent clearing under some pines. It was early October, and the air had that damp, leaf-mulchy smell, cool but not cold. Sky was clear. Moon was almost full. I'd packed light, just the basics. One-person tent, foam pad, sleeping bag, stove, water bladder, and a small dry bag with food. I made some instant rice and tuna, listened to a few songs on my phone, then zipped everything up and called it a night around 10. I remember putting my boots under the flap right outside the door and tucking my pack inside at the foot of my sleeping bag. I always do that to keep animals from chewing on anything. I fell asleep to the sound of crickets and leaves shifting in the breeze. It was quiet, but not silent. The usual woods noise. Then, sometime deep into the night, I woke up. I couldn't tell what time it was. My eyes were open, but I couldn't see anything at first. Everything was just white. Not bright white like a flashlight in your face, more like a heavy fog, glowing from all directions. The whole inside of the tent was filled with it. There were no shadows, no corners, just light. And it was silent, completely, absolutely silent. That's what got me. It wasn't just that I couldn't hear anything outside. I couldn't hear anything. No wind, no insects, not even the rustle of the sleeping bag when I shifted. I couldn't hear myself breathe. I remember opening my mouth to try and say something. I could feel my jaw move, feel the vibration in my throat, but there was nothing. No sound. I sat up, or thought I did, but it felt slow, like I was underwater. My limbs moved, but not the way they were supposed to. There was this weird delay, and my arms felt heavier than they should have. I tried to unzip the tent, but I couldn't find the flap. My hands just kept passing through light. It was like the tent wasn't there anymore. Like the space around me had changed, but I hadn't caught up. Then everything faded out. Not suddenly, more like something dimming the world around me. The white glow sank away like a light being swallowed, and I don't remember anything else. When I came to, it was morning. Sun was coming through the trees. The first thing I noticed was how hot and cramped I felt. My mouth was full of something. I coughed and realized I had my pack half on my face. My sleeping bag was tangled around my legs, and my camp stove was jammed against my ribs. All my gear was inside the tent with me. All of it. The bear bag, which I'd strung up 20 feet away before bed, was lying across my chest. My boots were in there too, still muddy, wedged under my knees. The dry bag with food, the fuel canister, the trekking poles. Everything I'd left outside or packed away was now just piled on top of me. It was like someone had dumped all my gear on me in the night and zipped the tent shut again. I sat up slowly. My head was pounding. I had this dull ache behind my eyes, like a dehydration headache, but worse. My throat felt raw. When I unzipped the tent and looked around, the woods were quiet again. Normal quiet. Birds chirping, a squirrel tearing around up in the trees. I staggered out and immediately saw the rope I'd used for the bear bag. It was still tied around the same branch, but the knot was undone and the line was hanging limp, almost touching the ground. The bag had been cut clean open, not clawed, not chewed, just a straight, smooth slice. My boots were damp, like they'd been in wet grass, but there hadn't been any dew the night before, and the tread was packed with a reddish mud I didn't recognize. Not the kind of dirt in that part of the forest. Too fine, too clay-like. I checked my phone. It was dead. Battery had been around 60% when I went to sleep, but now it was black. Wouldn't even show the charge icon when I plugged in the solar pack. Everything felt off. I wasn't missing any time as far as I could tell. The sun was about where it should be early morning, maybe 7 or 8, but it was like I hadn't really slept, like my body had been through something and hadn't caught up. When I broke camp, I found something I hadn't noticed before. Just outside the clearing, maybe 30 feet into the brush, there was a small circle in the grass, maybe 5 or 6 feet across. The ground there was flattened, not trampled, just pressed down like something heavy had rested there. No scorch marks, no tracks, just a perfect round patch where the plants were bent outward in every direction. I checked for signs of animals, but didn't see anything. No fur, no droppings, not even broken branches nearby. Just that one weird, quiet circle in the middle of the woods. I hiked out before noon, didn't stop for lunch, didn't look back. When I got to the trailhead, my phone finally powered on. I had no service, but it showed the time as 3:47 p.m. The date was the same, nothing skipped, no lost day, no unexplained entries or photos. But when I opened the voice recorder, an app I never used, there was a new file from the night before. It was exactly 1 minute long. I played it. It was blank. No voices, no background sound. Just 1 solid minute of absolute silence. Then it stopped. I deleted it without thinking. I kind of wish I hadn't. I don't know what it meant or how it got there. I haven't gone back to that trail. I still camp sometimes, but only in groups, and I don't use that tent anymore. I gave it to Goodwill a few days later. Not because anything was wrong with it, but because it still smelled faintly like something unfamiliar. Not dirt, not sweat, not plastic. Something colder. Sterile, almost. I've tried to write it off. Maybe I sleepwalked. Maybe I had a weird dream and thrashed around and dragged all my gear in without realizing. But that light, that silence, not being able to hear my own breath, that wasn't a dream. I was awake for that part. I know I was. We hiked in through the eastern edge of Lassen National Forest, somewhere near Cinder Cone. I don't remember the trail name now. It wasn't marked all that well, and neither of us cared. Kayla just wanted to get off the grid for a few days. No cell service, no traffic, just quiet. We packed light, 1 tent, 2 sleeping bags, basic gear, a jet boil, trail mix, canned soup. Kayla carried her big old cannon with the strap fraying at the edges. She took pictures of everything. The trees, the trail, the sky, me trying to light a fire. I used to make fun of her for it. She said she liked keeping proof of the small stuff. The first night, we set up camp by a shallow creek, maybe 4 miles in. No one else was around. We had the place to ourselves. After dinner, we sat by the fire and talked about how weird it felt not to check our phones every 10 minutes. She joked about deleting Instagram when we got back. She never would have done it. She loved posting. That night, around 3 a.m., something woke me up. At first, I thought it was the wind. The tent fabric moved like something had brushed it, but the trees were totally still. I sat up and unzipped the flap to check, but nothing was there. No animals, no sounds except the creek. I looked over. Kayla was zipped into her bag, back turned toward me. The next morning, she asked if I'd gotten up at night. I said, yeah, kind of. She said she thought she'd heard whispering, but figured it was a dream. I didn't hear anything like that. We kept hiking the next day. She was quiet for most of it. Normally, she talked a lot when we walked. Random facts, stories, stuff about her job. But that day, she just walked ahead, snapping pictures. Late afternoon, clouds started building fast. We weren't expecting rain, but it rolled in hard and fast, soaked us before we could set up the tent. We found a spot under some thick pines and made a sloppy camp. Everything was damp, and Kayla's camera fogged up. At some point, she said, "It feels off up here." I asked what she meant. She shook her head, like we're being watched. That night, I had a dream, or something like one. I saw a light outside the tent, bright white, but it didn't flicker or move like a flashlight. It just hovered. I couldn't move my arms or legs, couldn't even call out. I felt like something was right outside, just behind the fabric. The air inside the tent felt too heavy to breathe. Then I blacked out. When I woke up, it was morning. The tent was still zipped. Kayla was gone. At first, I figured she'd gotten up early to pee or take pictures, but her camera was still in the tent. That was strange. She never went anywhere without it. Her boots were gone, so I figured she'd just gone for a quick walk. An hour passed, then 2. I walked a full circle around the area, maybe a half-mile out. Called her name. Nothing. By noon, I was yelling. I climbed up onto a rock ridge to get a better view and just spun in circles, scanning the forest for her. But there was no sign. Not even footprints in the soft dirt around our site. Around 2 p.m., I panicked and left everything but my phone, which still had no signal. I marked a waypoint on my GPS app and started hiking back out, fast. It was dusk when I reached the trailhead. I drove until I had a bar of service and called 911. Search and rescue was dispatched by nightfall. They made me wait with a deputy at a ranger station while the first group went up. They found our campsite the next morning. My tent, our food, her sleeping bag, but no sign of her. Then things got weird. They asked me to send them any photos I had of her. I said she'd taken most of them on her Canon, but I had a few on my phone, from earlier hikes, past trips, plus the one I took of her by the creek that first night. I opened my gallery to show them. It wasn't there. I thought maybe I'd accidentally deleted it, so I checked the trash folder. Nothing. Then I scrolled through every photo I had from the last year. There wasn't a single picture of Kayla. Not from the campsite. Not from the road trip down from Eugene. Not from anything. It made no sense. I had photos from the grocery run the day before we left. I had a blurry selfie I remembered taking of both of us at the gas station. But now it was just me in the frame. I told the deputy it had to be a glitch. Maybe my phone corrupted something or the cloud backup failed. He nodded but didn't say much. They asked for her full name. I said Kayla Darnell. Spelled it out, gave her birthday, where she worked, everything I knew. They ran it and came back saying there was no record of anyone by that name in Oregon. I thought maybe they had the spelling wrong, so I pulled up my texts to show them messages from her. There were none. Not a single message from her number. I scrolled through months of conversations. Nothing. I checked my contacts. Her number wasn't saved. My call log had no history of us talking, even though we'd confirmed the trip just 3 days before. I gave them the number anyway. They dialed it. Disconnected. When I got back to my apartment, I opened my laptop and pulled up my social media. Kayla wasn't in any of it. No tags, no comments, no likes. We'd been friends for almost 3 years. We met at a film festival in Bend. She'd introduced me to half the people in my network. She'd posted pictures of us hiking dozens of times. Now there was nothing. Not even her profile. I checked mutual friends. No one seemed to know who I was talking about. I called people, old coworkers, a guy she dated last winter. They didn't remember her. When I went to our usual coffee spot and asked the barista if she remembered Kayla, dark blonde hair, wore that denim jacket with the patches, she said, "Sorry, don't think so." I went to the art supply store where Kayla used to work weekends. Same thing. No one recognized the name. But the tent was still packed with 2 sleeping bags when I got home. Hers was blue. The tag inside said K. Darnell in Sharpie. The weirdest part is, I still remember things she said. Specific things, jokes, little phrases. One time she called ferns forest squid, and I still think about that when I see them. It's like she's there in my head, but the world decided she never was. I was working out of a temporary botany field lab in central Utah. Just me and a generator about 100 miles from the nearest town. Nothing but sandstone and sagebrush for miles. The station sat in a narrow gulch just south of the San Rafael Swell, backed up against a small bluff. The place was meant for one person. Tiny living quarters, attached greenhouse, minimal everything. I was cataloging some genetically variant buckwheat strains and monitoring soil chemistry. Real quiet work. Solitary. That week, the weather had been dry and still. Too still, actually. Not a breeze, not a cloud. The air felt stale, like the whole landscape was holding its breath. My greenhouse windows stayed wide open all day, and the air didn't move. Even the insects were sparse. It made the heat sit differently. Heavy, even at night. It started with the soil sensors blinking out. I had 6 of them buried in different corners of the greenhouse. All custom rigged with a little Arduino array I put together myself. They tracked temperature, moisture, and pH, sent the data to my laptop over Wi-Fi every 10 minutes. Worked great until Tuesday morning. I woke up, checked my charts, and saw a 5-hour gap from midnight to just before 5. The whole system had flatlined. Then it picked back up like nothing happened. I thought maybe the Wi-Fi had gone out, but my laptop was still online and the generator hadn't shut off. I double-checked the timestamps. It wasn't a power thing. That afternoon, I opened up the greenhouse and noticed one of the hanging LED grow lights had shorted. The plastic casing was warped. Looked half melted, like someone had taken a blowtorch to the edge of it. It wasn't close enough to any heat source for that to happen naturally. It also wasn't hanging straight anymore. The wires had pulled loose on one side. I replaced it and chalked it up to a freak electrical issue. Maybe the wiring had been bad from the start. The next night around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sensor alarm chirping. 3 short beeps, meaning a pH drop below 4.0. That's a serious acid spike and totally unheard of for that soil. I pulled on my boots, grabbed a flashlight, and headed out to the greenhouse. The air was wrong. It smelled like burned dust, not smoke exactly, just scorched minerals. The kind of smell you get when lightning strikes near rock. When I opened the greenhouse door, the humidity hit me like a wave. It wasn't supposed to be humid. I hadn't watered that evening, and it hadn't rained in days. Still, the inside of the glass was fogged. I stepped in and froze. Every single plant had turned. They weren't like that when I went to bed. I checked them myself, did a round with the notepad, checked the roots on the gallium hybrids, misted the ferns. Everything was fine. But now every pot had rotated, not toppled or dragged, turned, as if each one had been gently swiveled in place. All of them were facing inward, toward the center of the greenhouse. There, right where the soil sensors converged, was a bare patch of dirt. just a meter wide. I hadn't planted anything there. I'd left it open for new specimens. The soil was disturbed, not dug up, but pushed down in a smooth, even circle, like something had been resting there. There were no prints, no marks, just a shallow depression, and above it, the glass ceiling was scorched, faint but visible. A black, smoky outline fanned outward in a ring, maybe a foot across. The glass wasn't cracked, but it had spider-webbed faintly in the center of that black mark. The metal framing around it had a shimmer, heat distortion, like it had been warped microscopically. I didn't go any closer. I just backed out of the greenhouse and locked the door. The next morning, I checked the cameras. I had one camera set up in the greenhouse for time-lapse growth tracking. It took a still every 30 seconds and compiled a composite each day. I opened the folder for the previous night and let the video play. The plants were normal until about 12:47 a.m. Then the footage glitched. One frame showed static. After that, the next frame was totally black and the following one was blank white. The timestamp jumped forward 4 hours. I looked through the raw stills. Every file between 12:47 and 4:51 was corrupted, unreadable, nothing but digital noise. I pulled the card, ran a recovery program. It found 437 images marked as missing or partial. I clicked through the thumbnails. Most were garbage, data fragments. A few showed brief flashes of color, violet, pale green, like the lens had caught a sudden burst of light. One had what looked like a curve of something smooth and metallic in the top right corner. Too blurry to tell. No identifying features. I deleted the corrupted files and shut the camera off. I haven't turned it back on since. That day, the plants started acting strange. Some of the gallium leaves curled inward, like they were trying to close around something. The stems on 2 of the wild barley pots bent 90 degrees toward that central bare spot and stayed that way even after I rotated the pots again. I tried moving one of the ferns back to the edge of the bench. Next morning, it was tipped over, facing the center again. On Thursday night, I stayed up, sat in the greenhouse in a chair, flashlight in my lap. I didn't know what I expected to see. Around 1:30, the temperature dropped, fast. I had a thermometer out and watched it fall from 77 degrees Fahrenheit to 61 degrees Fahrenheit in under 5 minutes. Just in the greenhouse, the air felt charged. My hair stood up on my arms. The LED lights flickered, then shut off completely. Then it was quiet. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 10. The silence was total. No generator, no wind, not even the distant whine of insects. Just stillness. I didn't hear or see anything else. But when I turned my flashlight back on, the bare spot in the center looked darker than before. Like the soil had been wet, but it hadn't rained. The plants were tilted again, just slightly. The next morning, I found all 6 of the soil sensors burnt out. The plastic casings were bubbled and the wires had melted into the dirt. My laptop was fine. Nothing else in the greenhouse was damaged. That was my last day out there. I radioed in, told them I was cutting the trip short due to a hardware malfunction. They didn't question it. Before I left, I scooped a small sample of the soil from the center patch. Brought it back in a sealed jar. It's still on a shelf in my apartment. It dried out over the next few days. The color shifted, started as a dark red, now it's more gray. There's a faint ring around the inside of the glass where the soil doesn't stick, like something pushed outward from the center and left a residue. Sometimes when I walk past it, I swear I can smell that same burned dust. But only for a second. It started when a sheriff's deputy found me walking across a soybean field just outside of Carthage, Illinois, around 3 in the morning. I was barefoot and completely naked. No wallet, no phone, nothing. Just me and this weird buzzing in my head that wouldn't go away. I didn't remember how I got there. The last thing I could clearly recall was sitting on my couch watching a baseball game, Cubs versus Reds. That would have been Tuesday night. Then I blinked, and I was 30 miles from home, walking through a field in the dark with freezing dew soaking my legs. The deputy asked if I'd been drinking or using anything. I told him no. I was shivering, but I wasn't hurt, not visibly. He wrapped me in a blanket and called for an ambulance. I told them my name, Eli Callahan, and where I lived. They ran me through the system to check for priors or mental health alerts, and something flagged. They kept giving each other weird looks. The medic asked me if I had head trauma, if I'd fallen, if I remembered being in a car accident. I said no to all of it. I felt mostly okay, just weird, like I'd woken up too fast after sleeping way too long. At the hospital, they took blood, urine, and did a CT scan. Everything came back clean. No signs of stroke, no drugs in my system, no physical injuries besides some scratches on my shins. I kept asking what was going on. They didn't really answer me. Eventually, a detective showed up. Tall guy with a crew cut, maybe early 50s. He sat down in the corner of the ER room and watched me for a while before he said anything. Then he asked me for my social security number. I gave it to him. He asked if I'd ever changed my name. I told him no. Then he pulled a small fingerprint scanner from his bag, like one of those portable ones cops use, and took my prints. He didn't tell me the results, but his whole posture changed afterward. More rigid. He excused himself and stepped outside. 2 more officers showed up 10 minutes later and stood just outside the curtain. That's when I started getting nervous. Eventually, someone from the state came in, maybe a Fed, not sure, and they asked me to follow them to a secure office at the hospital. I wasn't under arrest, but they didn't want me leaving. They were polite, but firm. We sat down in this windowless room, and the man showed me a folder. Inside was a copy of my birth certificate, my driver's license photo, even high school yearbook pictures. All of it matched. The address was right. The parents were right. My birth date was right. Then he said, "Your DNA matches the file. We confirmed your identity, but your fingerprints don't." I thought he was joking. I laughed a little, but he didn't. He showed me a sheet with 2 sets of prints, one from my DMV file from when I renewed my license last year, and one from the scanner they just used on me, side by side. They didn't match. They looked close, similar loops and arches, but the minutiae were different. Ridge breaks, bifurcations, and deltas, stuff you can't really fake or change. Not easily. He said, "You are Eli Callahan, but these aren't your fingerprints." That's when I noticed my eyes in the mirror behind him. They were gray, not bluish gray or hazel, just pale gray, almost silver, like frost. I leaned closer to check, blinking hard. I've had brown eyes my whole life. My mom used to say I had the same eyes as her brother, warm and dark. I'd seen them in mirrors every day. Now they were gray. When they brought my mother in the next morning, she stared at me for a long time before she spoke. She didn't cry or hug me. She just looked confused. I said, "It's me, Mom." And she said, "It sounds like you, but your eyes," that was the first thing she said. "Your eyes were brown. Why are they gray now?" They did more scans, this time focused on my hands and eyes. They tested for chemical exposure, pigment disorders, anything they could think of. Nothing came back unusual, just not consistent with who I used to be. Over the next few days, they kept me for observation. The doctors talked in hushed voices. Everyone seemed polite but distant, like they were handling something fragile. I didn't feel different inside. My memories were intact. I remembered my childhood, my passwords, my landlord's name. I even recited the combination to the lock on my gym locker. But little things started bothering me. I couldn't remember the name of my 5th grade teacher, even though I'd told people stories about her before. I blanked on the lyrics to a song I knew by heart. My handwriting looked off. Same basic style, but messier, like I was faking my own signature. And there were scars I couldn't explain. One on the back of my shoulder blade, round and flat, about the size of a nickel. It looked old, like it had healed years ago. But I'd never had surgery there, never even had a mole removed. I started having dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but repeating images. A room that felt huge but had no corners, soft glowing light with no source. A sensation of floating, not flying but drifting like being underwater. The sound of clicking, rhythmic and layered like bones tapping glass. Sometimes I woke up and my nose was bleeding. Not heavy, just enough to stain the pillow. They finally let me go home after 5 days. I had to sign forms I didn't fully understand, mostly privacy waivers and something about non-standard biometric variants. My mom picked me up and drove me home. She didn't say much. When I stepped inside my apartment, everything looked the same. My mail was piled up. The dishes I'd left in the sink were still there, crusted and dry. But it didn't feel like mine. I walked from room to room like I was visiting someone else's place. I tried watching baseball again, thinking it might jog something back into place. But I couldn't follow it. Not the rules, I still remembered those, but the rhythm of the game. I kept getting distracted, zoning out during pitches, blinking and realizing I'd missed whole innings. At my job, people said I seemed off. One coworker, Shannon, said my voice sounded slightly higher, like I had a cold. Another said I'd gotten thinner, even though I weighed the same. And sometimes people didn't recognize me at all. I ran into a guy I'd gone to school with, Kyle Brewer, at the gas station. And when I said hi, he gave me this blank look and said, "Sorry, man, I don't think I know you." I reminded him who I was, told him about Mr. Ralston's physics class where we'd gotten detention together. He just shook his head and said, "Nope, I don't remember any of that." Even after I showed him a photo of the two of us from high school, he looked at it and said, "That's you?" He said, "Looks kind of like you, I guess." I don't know what happened to me. I don't know where I was during those missing hours or why the things that should fit don't anymore. But I wake up sometimes with that buzzing in my head again, and the dreams keep coming. Always that same sound, click, 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 and the feeling that I'm being pulled upward, weightless, into something too big to see. My mom doesn't call much anymore. She says I sound like her son, but she can't look me in the eyes when we talk. I think it's because of the color, or maybe it's something else. Maybe she sees what I don't. Maybe she knows something left and something else came back. We were on day 6 of a 9-day mission off the coast of Vanuatu, southeast side of the Banks Islands. Nothing dramatic, just a standard acoustic survey. I was there to run hydrophone drops over a trench we'd mapped on a prior trip, something like 6,500 meters deep, never properly profiled. Our vessel Alcyon was a small, retrofitted research ship, barely 50 meters bow to stern, 6-person crew, just enough room for bunks, a cramped galley, and one workstation with sonar and data feeds. The rest was deck space for deploying the winch and gear. We were all tired. The heat hadn't let up since we left Port Vila. Humid, windless days, warm rain at night. Everything felt damp. That morning, I dropped the hydrophone just after 700. We'd marked a spot about 3 miles off the shelf where the seafloor dropped fast. No seismic activity reported there. No known vents or faults. Just depth. Quiet, empty depth. The device hit full descent after 20 minutes, and I powered up the monitor. Normally we get background noise, biological chatter, occasional whale clicks, distant ship engines, but this time we picked up something else. It was a hum. Low frequency, maybe 18 hertz, well below human hearing, but the display caught it clear. Uniform, unmodulated, and steady. Not pulsed like sonar, not variable like marine engines. It was too clean, too perfect. We logged it and let the hydrophone sit for 6 hours. The hum never fluctuated. No Doppler drift, no distortion. It didn't respond to movement either. Didn't echo or react to the line tension shifting. Just a constant vibration in the water. Even weirder, the hum wasn't traceable. We triangulated twice, then 3 more times. Each time the origin moved, only slightly, but just enough to throw off the math, almost like it was repositioning itself by meters every hour, but always staying out of direct alignment. By nightfall, it was still going. I reeled up the hydrophone and ran a final sweep. The hum faded once the sensor broke 3,000 meters, like it hit a wall. We marked the cutoff, noted the anomaly, and stored the rig. Dinner was quiet. Nobody said much, but everyone had noticed the vibe shift. Ollie, the deckhand, made a joke about giant refrigerators down there, but nobody laughed. We shut down the main systems around 22:30. Generator was on low to keep refrigeration and nav lights going. The sea was flat, not even a breeze. It was warm enough that I slept with the hatch cracked. That night, we drifted 5 nautical miles. We had no engines running, no active propulsion. The drift didn't match the tide or prevailing currents. Our instruments didn't log any external force. No wind, no swell, no sudden shift in ballast, just movement. And none of us woke up. Except for Kat. She was the youngest on the crew, early 30s, marine biologist from Wellington. Smart, sarcastic, always up early with coffee before anyone else. But that morning, she wasn't in the galley, wasn't in her bunk either. We found her up on the aft deck, curled into the port railing, barefoot. Eyes open, not blinking. Her lips were slightly parted, but she wasn't speaking. Her pupils were fully dilated. I waved a hand in front of her face, snapped fingers. Nothing. I checked her pulse. It was normal. Breathing slow but steady. She wasn't asleep. She was just absent. We got her down to the infirmary cot and kept her warm. About an hour later, she blinked once and took a deep breath like surfacing from deep underwater. She didn't seem scared at first, just exhausted. She didn't speak right away, just stared at the ceiling. When she finally talked, she didn't mention being outside. She didn't even know she'd left her bunk. She said she'd been dreaming of water, but it wasn't wet. That was her phrase. It wasn't wet. She described being in a space where everything looked like it was made of liquid, but it didn't behave like liquid. No drag, no sound, just shimmering surfaces and dark shapes moving behind them. She said there were no lights, but everything glowed. No walls, but she couldn't move. She kept saying, there was something watching, but not from the outside. We asked her to explain. She just shook her head and started crying. We ran a full physical on her. No signs of stroke, no concussion. We called into the Maritime Health Line and gave them her vitals. They told us to keep her under observation, monitor for seizures. Around noon, she vomited seawater. We hadn't been in the water. Nobody had. She hadn't even been topside long enough to ingest spray, and there was no salt on her skin. But the stuff she threw up was unmistakably briny. Thick, almost gelatinous. It stank of decay like something scooped from below the photic zone. We bottled it and froze a sample. The rest we dumped. I checked the navigation logs again. Between 0 and 400, we moved 5.3 nautical miles northwest. No engine activity, no anchor drift, no changes in water current data. Our GPS track looked like it had been erased and redrawn manually. Not smooth like normal drift, just segmented, almost artificial. The timestamps didn't line up. At 0317, there was a 30-minute blank in the log. Not a power failure, just nothing. Like the system had kept running, but stopped recording. Later that day, I reviewed the deck cams. At 0302, the bow camera went white. Not blinding, just fully white, like fog. The lens wasn't obscured, there was no glare, no directional light, just a clean, featureless white screen. That lasted for 6 minutes. Then the feed cut. When it resumed, Kat was already on deck, lying on her side. No footage of her walking out, no footage of the doors opening. The other cameras, port and starboard, showed the same whiteout. All of them at the exact same time. Then darkness. Then back to normal. All systems rebooted themselves. That night, nobody slept. I stayed up watching the horizon. It was dead calm again. Not a sound, not even gulls. The hum we'd recorded that morning wasn't present anymore. I dropped the hydrophone just in case, but the water was quiet. The next morning, Kat seemed better. Pale, but alert. She didn't remember much. Said she'd had a dream about sinking, but in reverse, like being pulled upward through pressure. She asked why her bunk was wet. We hadn't told her about the seawater. I checked her mattress. The sheets were dry. Her pillow, though, smelled faintly of brine. We ended the expedition a day early. By the time we docked, we were all jumpy. Even Ollie stopped making jokes. We logged everything with the university, handed off the recordings, filled out incident reports. Kat got blood work done. Clean. No signs of hypoxia, infection, or neuro issues. They told her she might have had a dissociative episode, but that doesn't explain the 5-mile drift, or the seawater, or the whiteout on the cameras. I still have a copy of the hum recording. I've played it for audio engineers, biologists, even a friend who works with offshore oil rigs. Nobody's been able to pin it down. It's not tectonic, not mammalian, not mechanical. And when I run a frequency analysis, the spectrogram shows something I can't explain. A repeating notch like a signature. It cycles every 47 seconds. It's not a sound, it's a gap. Something is removing that part of the signal. Perfectly. Every time. I was driving west through Nevada, somewhere past Tonopah, but before hitting the California line. It was just after 10 p.m. early August, hot enough that the inside of the car still felt like an oven, even with the AC on low. I'd left Ely that afternoon after visiting my cousin. Figured I'd drive halfway and crash in one of those cheap motels off 95. Nothing fancy, just needed a bed and a working shower. I had music going, windows cracked a little. No other cars around, just that long, empty highway slicing through desert and scrub, You'd think it would be boring, but there's something kind of peaceful about that kind of drive. Until it wasn't. First weird thing was the cones. Came up on an off-ramp around 10:20, figured I'd pull off and top off the tank, even though I still had half left. Just wanted to stretch my legs. But there were orange construction cones across the exit and one of those portable flashing arrow signs blinking left, even though there was no detour and no construction equipment in sight. Just sand and empty road. All right, I thought, no big deal. Maybe the ramp's busted or the gas station's closed. 10 minutes later, same thing. Next off-ramp, same cones, same arrow, same total absence of any reason for them to be there. I slowed down a bit and looked. No construction crews, no lights down the side road, just black desert stretching out forever. I kept driving. I passed 4 more blocked exits over the next 40 minutes. No oncoming cars, no headlights behind me. It was like I was the only one on that stretch of road. At one point, I pulled into the emergency lane and got out. Left the headlights on so I could see the gravel shoulder. It was quiet. No bugs, no wind, just my engine ticking as it cooled and the weird feeling that something was off. I got back in and checked my phone. No signal, which wasn't weird for that area, but the GPS wasn't loading either. Just a gray screen with a little blue dot stuck in place like the map refused to scroll. I kept driving. By 11:30, I started to feel like I was looping. I passed a blue mile marker that said 143, then about 20 minutes later passed another that also said 143. Same graffiti, a faded "Send help" someone had sharpied underneath. I was sure I hadn't turned around. The road never curved, it was dead straight. Around midnight, I pulled over again, shut off the engine this time, and stepped out. Sky was clear. You could see every star, that deep kind of night where the Milky Way actually glows. I leaned against the car and looked up for a while, trying to calm myself down. There was no reason to panic. Probably a glitch in the GPS. Maybe the exits were part of a long construction zone I didn't know about. Desert roads can be weird. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the sky. Just something to do. I zoomed in a little, tried to get the stars lined up over the curve of the windshield. Then I got back in and started driving again. No music this time, just the hum of tires on pavement. That's when I noticed the overpasses. They were subtle at first, just concrete walkovers, maybe every 5 miles. I hadn't really registered them before, but once I noticed the first, I started counting. Low concrete structures with railings and nothing underneath, like bridges built for a road that never got finished. It was the 3rd or 4th one that made me slow down. There was something standing on it, not moving, just there, right in the center of the overpass. Tall, at least 6 feet, maybe more, slender, perfectly still. I only saw it for a second before I passed under and lost sight. I checked the mirror but couldn't see anything in the dark. I slowed way down and waited for the next one. Same thing. Another figure standing in the exact same spot, dead center facing forward, not hunched, not holding anything, just upright. My headlights didn't quite reach that high, but the silhouette was clear. I couldn't make out features. It looked smooth, almost rounded at the head, no visible clothing, no outline of hair or ears or anything like that. Just a vertical shape, like a person made of shadow. I passed under it. There were more. Every overpass, identical figures, never moving, never reacting, no light reflecting off them at all. I drove another 5 miles, then pulled off to the shoulder again, heart thudding in my chest. Rolled down the window and listened. Nothing, not even wind. I grabbed my phone and opened the photo I'd taken earlier of the stars. Zoomed in without really thinking, just looking for constellations or something to ground me. That's when I saw them. 4 figures, at the very top of the image, silhouetted against the stars, standing on the overpass I hadn't noticed at the time. Perfectly spaced, evenly aligned, too symmetrical to be people just hanging out on a bridge in the middle of nowhere. One of them looked taller than the rest. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I started the car again and drove faster. I ignored the speed limit. Blew past 3 more exits, all blocked. All with cones and blinking arrows that didn't make any sense. The next overpass had 2 figures on it, then 4, then 7, like they were multiplying. Still not moving, still silent. At one point, I passed under one, and I swear, just for a second, I heard something, like a metallic thrum, low and distant, vibrating through the frame of the car. It only lasted a moment. I couldn't even tell if it was real or something in my ears. I floored it. I don't know how long I drove after that. Time felt weird. My dash clock jumped at one point. I saw it change from 12:46 to 2:08 in less than a minute. I tried to make sense of it, but gave up. At 2:43 a.m., and I remember that time exactly because my phone finally buzzed with signal, I found a gas station. No off-ramp, just a plain road veering off the highway with a weathered sign that said Lundy Market and Gas. The place looked abandoned, but the lights were on. I pulled in and sat in the lot for a while, engine running. No one came out, no cars in the lot, but the store lights were buzzing inside, flickering a little. I stepped out, legs shaky, and walked to the door. It was locked. I knocked once, waited. A figure moved behind the counter. Not fast, not like they were startled, just a slow turn. I couldn't see their face. The glass had a glare, but the shape was wrong. Shoulders too narrow, head too long. I backed away and got in the car. Turned around, got back on the highway, and didn't stop until I hit Bishop, California just before sunrise. The cones were gone after that. So were the overpasses. When I checked the dash cam footage later, all the overpass clips were blank. Like those parts had been cut out. Just clean transitions. Road, road, skip, more road. And the photo I took, the one with the stars, it was gone. Just a black square in my gallery where it used to be. I run the same trail every morning. It cuts through a mix of fields and pine out near Liberty Ridge, maybe 20 minutes outside Spokane. Old logging roads, mostly dirt and gravel, not maintained but open to the public. It's quiet out there. No cars, no houses, just trees, fence lines, the occasional deer. I've been running that loop since high school. Never seen another person on it. This happened last October, about a week before Halloween. It was cold, mid-30s, A's, and still dark when I parked by the gate. I started the loop clockwise, like always. My headlamp was dim, and the sunrise hadn't hit yet, so everything looked bluish and flat. About 3 miles in, I came up on this shiny metal post. It caught the light weird. At first, I thought it was one of those emergency land survey markers. You see them sometimes, bright silver aluminum with a number. But when I got closer, I saw it wasn't a number at all. It was this long vertical plaque, about 4 feet tall, maybe 6 inches wide, made of some kind of brushed steel. It looked too clean, like it had just been placed. There were symbols etched into it. Not letters, not any alphabet I knew. Sharp, angular lines in repeating rows, almost like circuitry, or those stencils people use for model kits. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't graffiti. It didn't look hand-done. It was laser straight and perfect, too precise to be random. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds trying to make sense of it, then kept running. I figured maybe some kind of art thing or weird conservation marker. It didn't slow me down much. The rest of the trail was normal. I finished the loop and drove home. Didn't think about it again until that night when I was checking my mileage on my phone. I used Strava to track my runs. I opened the map and saw this weird flat line in the middle, like the GPS had frozen. It showed me stop for 47 minutes at mile 3.2, which didn't make sense. I was out there maybe an hour total, including warm-up and cool-down. I didn't stop for more than a few seconds the entire run. I figured the app glitched. My service is spotty out there, but I set a reminder to go back the next morning, mostly just to prove to myself that I didn't stand there for that long. Maybe I dropped the phone or forgot to pause it. I don't know. Next day, same route, same time, same conditions. Cold, dark, nothing unusual. But when I got to where the marker had been, it wasn't there. I looked around for a good 10 minutes. Walked up and down the stretch of trail where I remembered it being. Nothing. No post, no base, not even disturbed dirt. The spot was just empty. I even checked the GPS timestamp to be sure I was in the right place. Same location, down to the foot. What's worse is the trees around that section felt off. Like, the spacing was different. I know how that sounds, but I run there every day. I know which tree roots to jump, which turns to lean into. But this little 100-foot stretch suddenly felt unfamiliar, like it had been rearranged. The canopy was denser, the air smelled different, metallic almost, and the birds were quiet. That afternoon, I mentioned it to my neighbor Len, who used to be with the Forest Service. He's in his 60s now, mostly just gardens and fixes up old trucks. I asked if he'd heard about any new markers going up near Liberty Ridge. He said that trail hasn't been touched in 20 years. Nothing's zoned out there. You're probably just tired. That night, I had a headache that started right behind my eyes and kept spreading down my neck. I figured I was dehydrated, but water didn't help. Neither did Advil. It just throbbed for hours until I finally fell asleep on the couch. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up to this humming sound. Not loud, almost like distant power lines, but with this pulsing rhythm like it was breathing. I sat up and listened. It stopped after a few seconds. Scout, my shepherd mix, was staring at the front door, ears back, tail low. He wouldn't move until I turned on the lights. That's when I noticed the mud on my feet. My running shoes were by the door, caked with red clay like the kind out by Liberty Ridge. The soles were soaked, like I'd just stepped through a creek. Except I hadn't gone running that night. I hadn't left the house. I stood there just staring at them for I don't know how long. My keys were on the hook, door locked from the inside. I checked the back too. Everything locked, nothing broken. The next morning I felt hungover. My mouth tasted like metal. My arms ached like I'd been carrying something heavy. I checked the app again. A new route had logged at 1:39 a.m. A perfect loop out by the ridge. But it wasn't just the path that creeped me out. It had no elevation data. Flat zeros all the way across, and the speed, it said I moved 6.4 miles in 9 minutes. I deleted the app. For a while, I stopped running. I kept waking up in the middle of the night, thinking I heard that humming again. Sometimes Scout would bark at nothing, once even growled at my reflection in the living room window. I started keeping the blinds closed. One weekend, I forced myself to go back out there, just to see it in the daylight. I brought a shovel, figured I'd dig where the marker had been, just to check. The ground was hard-packed gravel, dry on the surface, but about 6 inches down, I hit something that clinked. I cleared the dirt and found a flat metal sheet, maybe 18 by 18 inches, flush with the soil. It wasn't steel or aluminum. It didn't rust, didn't scratch. I hit it with the tip of the shovel and it rang like a bell. No bolts, no edges, no writing. Just a smooth, perfect surface, colder than the ground around it. I tried to pry it up, but it didn't budge, not even a millimeter. I even looped a rope under it using a tent stake and tried to lift with my truck. Rope snapped clean in half. No give. That night, the headache came back. Same spot behind the eyes. Scout wouldn't come inside for hours, just stood in the yard, staring at the trees. The final thing that made me stop going out there happened last November. I was raking leaves when my phone buzzed with a weather alert. I glanced at the screen and it opened on its own. The map app popped up, unprompted, and zoomed in on Liberty Ridge. A single red pin marked last known point. I never placed it. That same day, I had a voicemail from an unknown number. Just static. But in the background, buried under the noise, I swear I could hear someone breathing. Steady, slow, and too regular to be natural. Like it was mechanical. I haven't been back since. When I was 7, I saw something in the woods behind our house. We lived in a small town in northern Minnesota, not far from the Canadian border. Lots of pine trees, long winters, not much else. Our backyard stretched into maybe 2 acres of dense woods. It was quiet out there, even in the summer. Just wind, birds, the occasional snap of branches. I don't remember what month it was exactly, but there wasn't snow on the ground, so it must have been late spring or early fall. I was playing out back with a little plastic dump truck, just pushing it through the dirt near the tree line. It was getting close to dinner, maybe 5 or 6. The sun was still up, but low. That kind of soft light where everything turns gold. I remember hearing a weird clicking sound, not like an animal, more rhythmic, like metal tapping against itself. I turned toward the woods and saw this shape just hovering above the ground, maybe 15 feet in. It was white, not glowing exactly, but too bright to be natural. Almost like looking at a light bulb through fogged glass. It didn't move. Didn't make any sound except for that clicking. It wasn't a person. It was too tall, too narrow, and it had no detail. Just this elongated, almost teardrop shape standing upright, perfectly still, a couple feet off the forest floor. I ran inside and told my mom. She was cooking and barely looked up. I kept saying, "There's something in the trees," but she just said it was probably a bird, or maybe the neighbor's dog again. I remember grabbing her hand and trying to drag her to the back door, but she shook me off and told me to wash up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that white shape floating there, silent. I ended up turning my desk lamp on and sleeping with the covers pulled over my head. For weeks after that, I wouldn't go near the woods. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it. Life kept going. I grew up, moved out, bounced around from Duluth to Fargo, then eventually down to the cities. My parents stayed in that same house. Even after Dad passed, Mom kept it up on her own until she had a fall last year and had to move into assisted living. I came up to help clean out the place and get it ready to sell. The house felt smaller than I remembered. The wallpaper was peeling in the hallway, and everything smelled a little like dust and lemon cleaner. I spent most of the first day packing old books and hauling things out of the attic. It was cold, mid-October, and raining just enough to make everything feel soggy. That misty kind of rain that doesn't fall straight down but swirls around like smoke. I stayed in my old room. It hadn't changed much. Same twin bed, same blue carpet. The shelves still had a few of my old action figures on them. I lay there that first night just listening to the creaks and groans of the house settling. Around 2 a.m., the motion light in the backyard flicked on. I got up and looked out the window. Nothing was moving. No raccoons, no deer. Just mist rolling through the trees, illuminated by the light. I stood there a while watching. Then I noticed something deeper in the woods. Not moving, but visible through the gaps between trees. It was a shape. Tall. Pale. At first, I thought it was a patch of fog catching the light at a weird angle. But it wasn't shifting or blowing around. It just hovered, vertical and still. I leaned closer to the glass, squinting. It was in the exact same spot I'd seen the thing as a kid. I didn't sleep after that. Just sat in bed with the light on, trying to convince myself it was a stump or maybe reflection from something in the yard. But when the sun came up and I looked again, there was nothing there. No stump. No sign of anything at all. That day I drove into town for more boxes. On the way back, I took the long route past the high school and the old gas station, just trying to burn time until dark. I didn't want to be alone in that house again. Not after what I'd seen. That evening, I kept every light on. I closed the blinds, locked the doors. Around midnight, I was brushing my teeth when the motion light kicked on again. I didn't go to the window this time. I just stood there in the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, heart hammering. The light stayed on longer than it should have. Almost 2 full minutes before it clicked off. When I finally looked, the yard was empty again. I barely slept. The next day, I went out to the edge of the woods. It was colder, but clear. No mist. I stepped between the trees, just a few feet in. The forest floor was soft, with pine needles. It was quiet. I walked to where I thought the thing had been. 15 feet or so from the house. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but the air felt weird. Charged, almost. Like right before a thunderstorm. The little hairs on my arms stood up. There were no prints, no marks on the ground. But the trees nearby had these faint scorch lines, thin black streaks about shoulder height, running perfectly horizontal. Not like lightning. Too uniform. I went back inside and didn't leave again that day. That night, I slept on the couch with the TV on low. At 3:11 a.m., the screen went black for a split second, then came back on. No sound. I sat up. The house was completely silent. No wind, no fridge hum, just nothing. Then the back door creaked. I thought maybe I hadn't locked it. I stood up and moved toward the kitchen. The door was shut, but the motion light outside was on. And through the thin curtain over the window, I could see that shape again. Bright, featureless, just beyond the porch. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. It hovered there, completely still. No sound, no movement. Just light. Not shining from it. It was the light. Like it didn't cast shadows, it erased them. I don't know how long I stood there. My legs went numb. Eventually, the light clicked off. I pulled back the curtain. The yard was empty. The next morning, I packed up everything I could and drove back to the cities. I told myself I'd come back later to finish, or maybe hire someone local to do it. I haven't been back. The house is still there, unsold. The real estate agent says it's been hard to show. people say it feels off. I don't tell them why. I was out in the yard digging out some stubborn roots along the fence line when I heard it the first time. Just my name, David. Plain and calm. Almost like someone just walked up behind me and said it. I turned around, thinking maybe it was my neighbor, Jess, from 2 houses down, but there wasn't anyone there. Just the wind in the trees and the sound of the shovel dropping. I stood still for a second, listening. Nothing. I figured I imagined it and went back to work. This was early June, not too hot yet, but humid. We'd just gotten a few days of heavy rain, so everything smelled like wet grass and mud. I'd been putting off yard work for weeks and finally had a free Saturday. I had my phone inside charging, so no music or podcasts, just me and the shovel and the occasional bird overhead. Maybe 20 minutes later, I heard it again. David. Same tone, same distance, but there was no one around. My house backs up to a small wooded area. Not deep enough to call a forest, but enough trees that you can't see through it when the leaves are thick. I walked to the edge and looked around. Nothing moved. No birds now, no wind either. That kind of stillness that feels like everything's holding its breath. I stood there a while staring into the trees. Then I just said, "Hello?" out loud, like an idiot. No response. I went back to work. But after that, I kept glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. That night, I told my wife about it. Katie laughed and said maybe I was dehydrated. I didn't argue. I had skipped lunch. The next day was a Sunday. I was out again trimming back some overgrowth near the shed when I heard it a third time. Same voice, same distance, like someone standing 6 feet behind me. Calm and clear. David? I spun around so fast I nearly dropped the hedge clippers. Still no one. This time, though, the dog heard it too. Our black lab Benny was sitting on the deck, and the second I turned around, he stood up and stared in the same direction I was looking, toward the woods. Not barking, not growling, just alert. I walked to the tree line again, scanned the whole area. I didn't go in, but I stood there a long time, waiting. I didn't hear it again. That evening, I set up my old digital voice recorder, one of those little handheld ones from the early 2000s. I used it back in college to record lectures. It still worked. I put in fresh batteries, hit record, and clipped it to one of the deck posts. Katie rolled her eyes when I told her, "So what, now you're ghost hunting?" I told her it wasn't like that. I just wanted to see if it was a neighbor messing with me or something. I let the recorder run all afternoon while I worked in the yard. That night, after dinner, I plugged it into the laptop and started skipping through the audio. Mostly just wind, birds, a few passing cars. Then, around the 38-minute mark, I heard myself grunt. I think I was pulling weeds near the back corner. A few seconds of silence. Then, David. It was quieter than I remembered hearing it in person, but it was definitely there. Not a whisper, not creepy sounding, just calm, like someone trying to get my attention. The hair on my arm stood up. I kept listening. 10 seconds after the voice, there was something else. A second voice. Different tone. Higher pitched, but faint. Like it was coming from farther away. It said, "We're still trying to bring you back." I replayed that part maybe 10 times. Katie thought I was messing with her. She accused me of editing the audio. I told her I didn't even know how. I'd never used any kind of audio software in my life. She eventually shrugged it off. "It's probably some radio interference," she said. "Or you picked up a conversation from someone walking by." But it wasn't radio. It was in the yard. The second voice was almost like it wasn't meant to be heard, like it got caught accidentally. I let it go for a few days, went back to work, tried to act normal, but that line stuck in my head. "We're still trying to bring you back." Back from what? That Thursday, I was mowing the lawn when I saw something in the woods. Not a person. Not really a shape even, just this shimmer, like heat rising off pavement, but vertical and motionless. It was 20 feet into the trees. I stopped the mower and stared at it. It didn't move, didn't change shape, just stood there like a ripple in the air. Then Benny started barking, loud, frantic. I turned around to quiet him, and when I looked back, the shimmer was gone. The next morning, Katie found me sleepwalking in the backyard. I'd left the back door open and was standing barefoot on the grass, staring into the trees. She said I was mumbling something, but she couldn't make it out. I don't remember any of it. After that, I moved the voice recorder into the house. I started sleeping with it running on my nightstand, just in case. The second night I did that, I caught something else. Around 3:40 a.m., the audio gets staticky. Not loud, just a little distorted, and there's this short burst of what sounds like electronic beeping. Right after that, there's a voice. Not mine, not Katie's. Just a single word, waiting. That was it. No more sleepwalking after that, but I started having these really vivid dreams. Or maybe not dreams. I'd wake up feeling disoriented, like I'd been somewhere else. Not scary, exactly. Just off. One morning I found dirt on my feet. Just a light dusting, like I'd been standing barefoot on dry soil. But the floor was clean. No sign of where it came from. I started keeping my shoes next to the bed. Kept the doors locked, windows shut. Didn't help. Twice I woke up with new scratches on my arms. Parallel, thin, like from brambles. But I hadn't been in the woods. I hadn't gone anywhere. Katie didn't notice anything. She thought I was stressing over work. She told me to take a few days off, go fishing or something. I almost did. I packed a bag one Friday, drove halfway to the lake, then turned around. I didn't want to be far from home. That weekend, I set the recorder outside again, just for a few hours. When I listened back, I heard something new. Not a voice, but a sound. A hum. Low, steady, like a transformer buzzing in the distance. Then, clear as anything, we weren't finished. I don't remember recording that. I don't remember anything happening that day. Just a regular Saturday. Katie asked me to stop with the recorder after that, said it was making me paranoid. I agreed, put it in a drawer, and left it there. But sometimes even now I still hear it. Usually when I'm alone, out in the yard or lying awake in bed. Not every night, but often enough. Always the same voice, calm, familiar, Dave. The phone started ringing around 2 in the morning. I wasn't sure why I even answered it the first time. It was just static, that harsh white noise you hear when there's no signal, but it wasn't quite normal. It wasn't silent or random. It was like a distant hum mixed with a static, something almost alive beneath the crackle. I'm Mike, by the way. I live alone in a small rental on the edge of Bend, Oregon. Nothing fancy, but quiet enough. I work day shifts at a hardware store, so nights are usually for sleeping or catching up on TV. The calls started 1 week ago. Always the same time, around 2, sometimes a little earlier or later. I'd wake up to the phone ringing, stumble over to it, and hear nothing but static. I hung up quick most nights because it freaked me out, but I didn't block the number. It was always the same one. No caller ID, just an untraceable line. The first few nights, I thought it was a prank or some glitch with the phone company, but then something changed. On the third night, just as I was about to hang up, I swear I heard a faint voice buried in the noise. It was hard to make out at first, like whispering underwater. I held the phone closer, heart beating fast. The voice said, "Help me." I froze, thought I imagined it. Called my friend Jason the next day to tell him about it. He laughed, said I was probably half asleep or hearing things, but I wasn't. The next night, the call came again. Same static, same time. This time, the voice was clearer, almost urgent. "Help me," it said again, followed by a string of numbers, 47921. I didn't recognize the sequence. It wasn't a date or a code I knew. I wrote it down. After the call ended, I sat there in the dark, the phone still in my hand, trying to make sense of it. I started checking my apartment, the windows and doors, trying to find any explanation. Nothing was wrong. No signs someone had been there, no interference or weird equipment. I even tested my phone line for problems, but it checked out fine. The calls kept coming every night. The voice repeated, "Help me," and the numbers. Sometimes the order changed slightly, sometimes the numbers were different, but there was always a sequence. One night, I decided to record the call. I set my phone to record while I answered, hoping to catch the voice more clearly. When I played it back in the morning, I could hear something beneath the static, almost like a low humming tone that wasn't there before. I showed the recording to a coworker who's into amateur radio. He said it sounded like some kind of coded signal, maybe a distress call, but couldn't tell from what. The night started getting worse. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, phone ringing in my hand, heart racing. I felt watched. The silence in the room thickened around me, like the air was heavier. One night, around 2:15, the call came, but this time the voice was different. Not a whisper, but a distorted sound that somehow matched my own voice. "Mike, help me." I dropped the phone, startled. The static swirled louder after that, almost like a storm. I sat on the floor, breath short, trying to calm down. I called Jason again, told him everything. "Mike, that's fucked up," he said. "Maybe you should go to a doctor or something. Could be stress." Maybe, but it didn't feel like stress. A couple nights later, I stayed up waiting for the call. I wanted to catch it live, try to figure out what it was. When the phone rang, I answered immediately. The static filled my ear, but beneath it, I heard a different message. Not words. A voice, but speaking too fast to understand. Then the numbers again. This time, the sequence was long. 47921-538-0647. I grabbed a pen and started writing as fast as I could. When the call ended, I looked at the numbers. They didn't make sense, not as dates or phone numbers. I Googled them in different combinations. Nothing came up. That's when the weirdness spilled into the rest of my life. My apartment lights started flickering at night. Sometimes when I looked out the window, I thought I saw flashes of light in the sky, not like fireworks or planes, more like brief glows low over the trees. One night, I noticed a buzzing sound outside, low and constant. I looked out but saw nothing. The next day, my neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, stopped me while I was getting the mail. "You look tired, Mike. Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just some weird phone calls," I said, trying to sound casual. She nodded slowly. "You know, I had something like that happen years ago, always at night. No one believed me either." Her eyes looked distant. I thanked her and went inside. I started feeling like I wasn't alone, like something was in the room with me but just out of sight. I checked my locks constantly, kept my phone close, but I was tired, wired, and confused. One night, around 2 a.m., the phone rang again. I answered, bracing myself. The static was louder than ever, the voice almost screaming beneath it. "Mike, we're still trying to bring you back." Then silence. I dropped the phone. That phrase made no sense, but it hit me in a way nothing else had. I went to the mirror, looked at my own face in the dim bathroom light. Tired eyes, pale skin, hair messy. Was I losing my mind? Had something happened I couldn't remember? I tried calling the phone company, the police, anyone, but no one took me seriously. The nights went on. I kept getting calls. The numbers, the voice, the static. One evening, I noticed something on my arm. Small red marks, almost like scratches, but arranged in a pattern I couldn't place. I showed them to a doctor who said it was probably from scratching in my sleep. Maybe. But I don't remember scratching. One night after another call, I went outside, hoping to see the lights or find some explanation. The air was cold, fog settling low over the street. The sky was clear, stars sharp. I saw a flash, a bright white light moving silently between the trees across the road. I froze. The light stopped and seemed to pulse, like it was watching me. I wanted to run but felt rooted to the spot. After a minute, the light vanished. I went back inside. The next morning, I found a small device on my doorstep. It was round, smooth, no buttons or markings. I don't know where it came from. I threw it in the trash. The calls continued. Every night, the same time. The voice, the numbers, the message. "We're still trying to bring you back." I don't know what that means. I don't know who we are. I don't know what happened to me. But I'm here, and I'm waiting for whatever comes next. I woke up in a hospital room with no idea how I got there. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed quietly, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. My head throbbed, and everything felt sluggish, like I'd been underwater for days. Nurses were moving in and out, but no one said much, just the usual check-ins and questions. When I tried to speak, my throat was dry and my voice came out hoarse. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:17 a.m. I tried to piece together what happened, but nothing came. The last thing I remembered was waking up on my couch Saturday morning, watching the news. After that, a total blank. A doctor came in, kind enough, but clearly as confused as I was. She said I'd been found wandering on a nearby hiking trail 3 days ago, disoriented and dehydrated. They admitted me for observation. When I asked if anyone had reported me missing, she said no. I pressed her about what happened during those 3 days, but she just shook her head. No clue. Then I noticed something on my left forearm, a cluster of tiny scars, perfectly round, about the size of pinpricks, arranged in a tight circle. I didn't remember getting them. They weren't bleeding and there was no swelling, but they looked fresh enough, not more than a week old. I showed the nurse and she examined them carefully. "That's strange," she said quietly. "No idea what could cause marks like this. No burns, no insect bites, no signs of an allergic reaction. We're going to run some tests." I tried to think back to the weekend, to when I might have gotten them. But my mind was like a wall, blank and silent. Later, a friend came by, Mark, a buddy from work. I told him what happened, showed him the scars. He looked concerned but didn't say much except to ask if I was feeling okay. I spent the next 2 days in the hospital running tests. Blood work came back normal, no signs of infection or toxins. The scars didn't match anything the doctors had seen before. I kept asking about cameras or witnesses on the trail, but no one had seen me. No cameras caught me either. It was like I disappeared off the map for those 3 days. On the third day, I was discharged. I went home, but I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. The scars itched occasionally, a dull, prickling sensation underneath, like something was just beneath the surface. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept waking up, sweating even though my room was cold. When I finally did drift off, I had strange dreams, a soft humming noise, lights moving across the sky, shapes that didn't quite make sense. Over the next week, I kept examining those scars. They didn't heal the way normal wounds did. Instead, they almost looked like they were embedded deeper into the skin, like a stamp that couldn't be washed off. One evening, I was looking at them under the bathroom light when the itching got worse, sharper. I felt a weird buzzing, almost like electricity, around my arm. I caught a faint glow coming from the marks, just for a second, and I swear I saw tiny lines of light pulsing beneath my skin. I rubbed my arm, thinking maybe I was imagining things, but the sensation stayed. I kept feeling like I was being watched, even at home. A few days later, I went back to the trail where I was found. It was early morning, fog rolling through the trees, and everything was damp and quiet. I walked the path slowly, trying to find any clue, something I might have missed before. I found a small clearing, surrounded by old pine trees. The ground was strange there, patches of dead grass and some rocks that looked like they'd been moved recently. In the center, the earth was oddly smooth, as if something had pressed down hard and left an imprint. I crouched down and saw faint marks in the dirt, long, thin, like claw scratches, but too even to be natural. I ran my fingers over them, feeling cold despite the morning chill. Suddenly, the hairs on my neck stood up. A low humming sound filled the air, soft but unmistakable. It felt like the air itself was vibrating. I stood up fast, looking around. No one else was there, just the trees swaying and the fog thickening. I turned to leave, but noticed something glinting near a tree root. I picked it up, a small metallic object, smooth and cold. It wasn't like any metal I'd handled before. It was light but heavy at the same time, with a strange warmth under my skin when I held it. I put it in my pocket and left the clearing quickly. The humming stopped as soon as I stepped back onto the trail. At home, I examined the object under a magnifying glass. It was perfectly round, no visible seams or markings, like it was crafted with precision beyond anything I'd seen. That night, the buzzing returned, stronger this time, and the scars on my arm pulsed with a faint blue glow. I couldn't sleep. I kept watching my arm as the light seemed to shift just beneath the surface. The next morning, the scars looked a little different. The circle had expanded, and I could swear the marks were rearranging themselves. Like they were alive, moving in patterns I couldn't understand. I called the hospital again, desperate for answers, but they told me to come in for another checkup. When I got there, the doctors took one look and were just as baffled. They ran more scans, but nothing showed up on the x-rays or ultrasounds. No foreign objects, no injuries below the skin. The scars didn't hurt, but they felt invasive, like a silent presence embedded in me. I asked if anyone else had ever had something like this. One nurse hesitated and mentioned an old case about unexplained skin markings on hikers, but couldn't say more. I left the hospital feeling more unsettled than ever. Back at home, the object I found started to hum softly when I was near it. It felt like it was responding to me, like it was connected to those scars. I tried to throw it away once, but found it back on my nightstand the next morning. No idea how it got there. In the weeks that followed, the buzzing and glowing became part of my daily life. I avoided mirrors because sometimes in the corner of my vision, I'd catch glimpses of shapes moving, not people, more like shadows shifting in impossible ways. I stopped telling people about it. Friends noticed I was distracted, maybe anxious. I wasn't sure how to explain what was happening. One night, I woke suddenly, feeling like I was falling. The room was spinning slowly, and that humming sound filled my ears, loud and insistent. I looked down at my arm, and the scars were shining brightly now, pulsing in rhythm with the buzzing. I felt a strange pressure behind my eyes, like a veil being pulled back. I closed my eyes, waiting. Then it stopped. The light faded, the buzzing ceased, and I was left in silence. After that night, the scars slowly faded over a few days, the glow disappearing entirely. The humming went silent. The object stopped responding. I kept the object, though, locked in a box. I don't know what it is or where it came from, and I still don't remember those missing 3 days. But sometimes when I'm alone and quiet, I swear I can hear that humming again, faint, distant, like a signal reaching out from somewhere beyond. I woke up on the floor of my bedroom, disoriented and aching all over. The light was dim, coming from a small night lamp near the bed. I blinked a few times, trying to get my bearings. My head felt foggy, like I'd just come out of a deep sleep. The first thing I noticed was that the door was shut tight and there was no handle on my side, just a smooth surface. No keyhole either. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. Nothing. The phone wasn't there. I checked the bed, the floor, the dresser. No phone, no keys, nothing. My heart started to race. The window was next. I went over and tried to open it. It wouldn't budge. I pressed my face against the glass and the cold seeped in. The window was sealed shut from the outside. I could see the faint outlines of tree branches and the dark sky beyond, but there was no way out. That's when I heard it. Tapping. Soft, irregular taps coming from the ceiling vents. They weren't loud enough to be a person knocking, but steady, like someone or something was trying to get my attention. I stood still, listening. The sound seemed to move along the vents, coming from different directions. The tapping paused, then started again in a pattern I couldn't understand. I tried yelling for help, pounding on the door with my fists, but no response. My voice sounded muffled in the room, almost like it wasn't really there. I wasn't sure if anyone was even nearby. I sat down on the bed, trying to piece together what had happened. I had no memory of how I got here or why I was locked inside. The last thing I remembered was going to bed the night before in my apartment in Portland. I was alone, had no plans, just ready to crash after a long day. The tapping kept coming. After a while, I realized it wasn't random. There was a rhythm. Tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. Like a code, but I couldn't make sense of it. I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to block out the sound, but it was faint enough that it seeped through. I tried to calm down and check the room for anything useful. My dresser drawers were empty except for some old clothes. The closet was locked, but I had no tools to open it. The vents themselves were sealed too small to fit my fingers through. Hours passed. I lost track of time. The room was silent except for the tapping and the faint hum of the air conditioning. I started to feel nauseous, lightheaded. It was like I was trapped in a bubble where nothing made sense. At some point, I noticed the air felt different, thicker somehow. I opened my mouth to breathe deeply, and the air was colder, tinged with a faint metallic smell. It reminded me of something, but I couldn't place it. Then, the tapping stopped. The silence was worse. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, waiting for something, anything to happen. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The night lamp dimmed, then brightened. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably, and the metallic smell grew stronger. My skin prickled. I felt watched. I looked toward the vent above my bed. The metal grate began to shift slowly, like it was moving on its own. A faint blue glow leaked through the edges. I couldn't move, frozen in place. The vent cover slid aside, revealing a narrow, dark space beyond. The blue light grew brighter and pulsed gently. I heard a faint mechanical whirring mixed with a low hum. Then, a shadow appeared, elongated, thin, and almost translucent. It didn't have a face or features, just a vague outline. It reached through the vent with what looked like a slender limb. My chest tightened with fear. The figure didn't speak or move fast. It just hovered there for a moment, then retracted and disappeared as the vent cover slid back into place. I tried to scream, but only a strangled sound came out. My limbs felt weak. The room went completely dark. I was in the dark for a long time, maybe minutes or hours. When the lights came back on, the room felt warmer, more normal, but the door was still locked. The window remained sealed. I noticed my arm. There were tiny, perfectly round marks in a cluster near my wrist, like pinpricks, but fresh and slightly raised. I didn't remember getting them. I pressed on the marks, and the tapping started again. But this time, it was inside my head, like a Morse code made of pressure waves. I couldn't stop it. The tapping was telling me something, or maybe trying to pull me somewhere I couldn't reach. Desperation set in. I screamed and pounded on the door again, but no response. I tried to break the window with a chair leg, but it was reinforced, like thick plexiglass or something stronger. That night, the tapping turned into whispers. Not words I could understand, just faint, high-pitched murmurs coming from the vents. Sometimes I thought I heard my name. Sleep didn't come. I sat on the bed, clutching my arm, staring at the ceiling vent as the whispers faded in and out. The next morning, the door suddenly unlocked. I didn't hear a click or a mechanical sound, just a soft pop, and the door swung open. I didn't hesitate. I ran out into the hallway. It was empty and eerily quiet, no sign of anyone else in the building. I found my phone on the kitchen counter down the hall. Battery was dead, like it had been off for days. I charged it and called my roommate, Mia. She answered immediately, sounding worried. She told me I'd been missing for 3 days. No one knew where I'd been. I asked what she meant, and she said I hadn't come home since Friday night. The police were called, but there were no leads. I told her about the locked room, the tapping, the marks. She said I sounded shaken, and I probably needed to see a doctor. I went to the hospital that afternoon. They examined the marks on my arm, but had no explanation. No bruising, no bites, no allergies. They just looked like tiny scars. Over the next week, I kept thinking about that room and the shadow in the vent. I tried to explain it away. Stress, hallucinations, sleep paralysis. But the marks stayed, and sometimes the tapping returned in my head when I was alone and quiet. I haven't told many people. It sounds crazy. Sometimes late at night, I still hear faint tapping from vents, even in my new apartment. The metal smell comes and goes too. I don't know what happened in that room or why I was locked in. I don't know who or what was trying to reach me. All I know is that I want to stay as far away from sealed doors and vents as possible. I set up camp near the edge of Echo Lake just before sunset. The mountains around were already cold and quiet, even though it was early September. I'd been hiking all day, and the idea was simple. Sleep under the stars, fish a bit, and maybe get some rest before heading back the next morning. The air was crisp, and there was a thin fog curling over the water as the sun dipped below the ridge. I was alone. No one else was around. The nearest trailhead was miles away, and the small campsite had that isolated vibe that made you feel like you were the last person on Earth. I liked it that way. After dinner, I sat on a rock by the shore, skipping stones and watching the water ripple. The lake was calm, almost glassy, reflecting the darkening sky. My watch caught the last bits of light, an old Seiko I'd had for years, the kind that ticks and has a faint glow on the hands. Nothing fancy, but I trusted it. Around midnight, I was still awake, bundled in my jacket, staring at the stars. That's when I noticed it. A faint glow under the water, just beneath the surface. At first, I thought it was some kind of reflection or maybe a fishing lure left behind by another camper, but the light pulsed like a heartbeat. It wasn't bright, just enough to stand out in the dark lake. I called out, "Hello?" but there was no reply. The glow didn't move or flicker randomly. It was steady, slow pulses, maybe every 2 or 3 seconds, weirdly hypnotic. I stood up and tested the water with my foot. Cold, as expected. The glow stayed in the same spot, maybe 20 feet out from shore, about chest deep. I looked around. No boats, no fishermen, no signs of anyone else nearby. Curiosity got the better of me. I figured I'd swim out and check it. I didn't bring a flashlight, but the moon was bright enough to see the outlines of the trees on the far side. I shrugged off my jacket, and stepped in. The water was icy. I waded out, feeling the soft mud underfoot give way to rockier ground. The glow pulsed steadily, a bluish-white color that was eerily beautiful. When I reached the spot, the light seemed to be coming from just beneath the surface, maybe a foot down. I dove under. The cold hit me hard, and for a moment I lost my bearings. But when I opened my eyes, I didn't see the glow anymore. The water was just dark, empty. No fish, no glowing object, no source. I surfaced and gasped for air, looking around. The glow had vanished completely. I tapped my wrist to check my watch. The second hand was frozen, stuck between the 9 and 10. I tried winding it, shaking it, but nothing. It was dead. I blinked, feeling a sudden wave of unease, like something was off, but I couldn't say what. I climbed out, wrapping myself in my jacket, rubbing my arms to warm up. I checked my phone. No signal, of course. I wasn't expecting any here, but something about the silence felt different, like the night had gone from peaceful to watching. I sat back down on the rock, shivering more from the feeling than the cold. The lake was still again. No glow, no sound except for distant wind through the pines. I tried to shrug off the weirdness, telling myself it was probably some natural thing, a bioluminescent algae maybe, or a fishing lure with a light that died when I dove in. But then I noticed something else. My legs felt numb. I looked down and my skin was covered in tiny, faintly glowing dots, almost like the bioluminescence had stuck to me. They didn't hurt, but the sight made me uneasy. I rubbed them off, but more appeared. I felt a chill run up my spine. I tried to stand, but my legs wobbled like jelly. The numbness was spreading. I sat back down, heart pounding. That's when I noticed the sky. It wasn't the same sky I'd looked at before. The stars had shifted, like the whole night had jumped forward or changed. I checked my watch again. Still dead. I pulled out my phone to check the time. It said 3:14 a.m., but I had no idea how long I'd been out there. The battery was low, but it still worked. I tried to get up and walk back to camp, but I kept stumbling. It was like my body wasn't responding right. The numbness was creeping higher. I sat on the ground and tried to stay calm, breathing slowly. Then I heard a faint humming, low and steady, coming from beneath the lake. I looked toward the water, the surface rippling slightly as if something moved under it. The moonlight shimmered on the ripples, but no more glow. The humming got louder, but it wasn't harsh or scary. It felt almost soothing, like a strange lullaby. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them, the numbness was gone. My limbs felt normal again. I stood up feeling disoriented but stable. The lake was silent, no humming, no glow. I decided to pack up and leave. I felt tired, like I hadn't slept in days. I gathered my gear and started the hike back toward the trailhead. The sky was just beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. When I reached my car, I pulled out my phone and tried to call my wife, Sarah. She picked up on the first ring. "Where have you been?" she asked, voice shaking. I'm not sure," I said. She told me she'd been worried sick. I realized then that I couldn't remember what had happened after I went to bed 2 nights ago. The last clear memory I had was setting up camp. I checked my watch again. It was still stopped. Later, at home, I looked at my arms in the bathroom mirror. There were no glowing dots, no marks at all, but a faint redness lingered where the numbness had been. I still don't know what the light was beneath the lake or why my watch stopped working. The whole thing feels like a strange dream I can't fully wake up from. Sometimes when I'm near water at night, I swear I hear that low hum again, just beneath the surface. I live in this quiet suburban neighborhood in western Oregon. Pretty typical place. Rows of modest houses, sidewalks cracked from old tree roots, the usual kids riding bikes after school. Nothing weird ever happened around here, or at least nothing that I noticed. That changed a few weeks ago when I started paying attention to my next-door neighbor, the house right beside mine on Maple Street. The one with the peeling white paint and overgrown bushes. Her name's Lisa, or at least that's what I think it is. I only ever heard it once when the mailman shouted it while dropping off packages. Lisa never seemed to go anywhere. I mean, I never saw her leave the house during the day. The blinds stayed shut most of the time, but the lights inside flickered on and off at strange hours. Sometimes I'd see the porch light blink for a few seconds, then go dark. Other times it was the living room lights switching on late at night, and at sometimes early morning. It never made sense. The oddest part was the silence. No sounds of a TV or music, no voices, no footsteps on the porch or driveway. It was like the house was alive but empty. I didn't think much of it at first. People keep to themselves. Maybe she worked night shifts, or maybe she was sick. I tried waving once when I saw her through a crack in the blinds, but she just pulled back into the shadows and didn't respond. After that, I stopped trying. One rainy Thursday night, I was up late watching a movie in the living room when I heard it. A tapping like metal against glass. It was coming from my bedroom window. The rain was light, just a drizzle, but the tapping was clear and steady, slow but deliberate. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. I live alone. My boyfriend was out of town. I glanced at the clock. It was 2:17 a.m. I got up and crept toward the window. The tapping stopped the moment I moved. I pulled back the curtain just enough to peer out. Nothing. The wet leaves on the lawn shivered in the breeze. The street was empty and dark. No one there. The porch light across the street flickered off. My heart was pounding in that weird way when you can't tell if it's adrenaline or just confusion. I waited a minute, then went back to bed. The tapping didn't come back. The next day, I told a couple of friends about it. They joked it was probably a raccoon or the wind. I wasn't so sure. Over the next week, the tapping happened 3 more times. Always late at night, always at my window, and every time I looked outside, no one was there. It wasn't random noise either. It was rhythmic, like a code or a message. I even tried tapping back once, just a simple 3 taps, but I don't think anything responded. One night, after the tapping started again, I got brave and pulled on my raincoat to check outside. It was cold and wet, but still no footprints or any signs someone had been there. I was standing on the porch, staring into the darkness when I noticed something else, Lisa's house. The front door was wide open. I blinked, thinking maybe I was mistaken. The door was supposed to be locked. But there it was, swinging slightly in the breeze. I debated whether to call the police or knock. I grabbed my phone, but before I could dial, the door slammed shut. I jumped back and hurried inside, locking my own door. I called the non-emergency line, but they said they'd send a patrol car to check it out. The next day, the police came by. The door was locked again, no signs of forced entry. They said everything seemed fine inside the house. No one was home. I asked about Lisa, but no one knew much. No records of recent visitors. No neighbors reported anything strange. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept hearing tapping in my dreams, faint but persistent. The tapping wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a presence. About a week later, I got home late from work around 11 p.m. I was tired, just wanting to collapse. But when I turned the corner to my street, I saw Lisa's house again. Lights on in every room. Not just flickering, full bright, like someone was moving from room to room. But I didn't see her come or go. I walked up to my front door and noticed something on the window ledge. It was a small, smooth piece of metal, shaped kind of like a thin rectangle, maybe an inch long, cold and slightly warm at the same time. I picked it up carefully and looked around. No one in sight. I took it inside, cleaned it, and set it on my kitchen table. It didn't look like anything I recognized. No scratches, no marks, but it reflected light in weird ways. Sometimes a faint blue glow, other times just dull. That night, I kept the piece of metal on my nightstand. Around 2 a.m., the tapping started again. I sat up and saw the light from my phone screen reflecting off the metal piece. Then I noticed my bedroom window. The rain was heavier now, and outside, the window was fogged over, but behind the condensation, I thought I saw a faint silhouette. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself I was imagining things, but the tapping continued, louder now, like someone trying to get my attention. The next morning, I checked the metal piece again. It felt warmer, almost pulsing. I thought about throwing it away, but I couldn't. Days passed. The tapping kept happening, but only when I was alone. I never heard it when Sarah, my boyfriend, was home. One evening, after a late dinner out, I came home to find the lights in Lisa's house off. The blinds were closed tight, no open doors. But then I saw it, a small, perfect circle cut out of one of the window blinds, right at eye level. That night, the tapping was more insistent. It was coming from the window with the blind that had the circle cut out. I stayed awake, staring at it. Suddenly, the tapping stopped, replaced by a low humming I hadn't noticed before. It vibrated through the walls and the glass, almost like the house itself was breathing. I felt a pressure in my chest, like something was pushing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I tried to move, but I was frozen. Then, a light flickered on outside, blue and white, shifting and swirling. I looked toward the window. The glass wasn't glass anymore. It was like staring into water. I saw shapes moving just beyond the surface, tall, slender shadows that didn't look human. I closed my eyes tight, and when I opened them, I was on the floor, my heart hammering, the tapping gone. I got up slowly and noticed my hand. There were tiny round marks on my wrist, 3 in a row, perfectly spaced, like someone had pressed a hot metal stamp against my skin. They weren't red or bruised, just faint, slightly raised. I hadn't felt any pain. The marks didn't fade for days. I tried showing them to doctors. They shrugged, said it was probably allergic or some kind of irritation. But I knew they weren't. Since then, the tapping stopped. Lisa's house is dark again. I don't know if she's still there or if she was ever really there at all. I still have the metal piece on my desk. Sometimes late at night, I swear I can hear soft tapping, not on the window this time, but inside my walls. I'm not sure what happened or why. I just know it changed something. Moving into the new house was supposed to be a fresh start for us. My wife, Clara, our 6-month-old daughter, and I left the city behind for a quieter life upstate New York. The house was an old brick place on the edge of a small town. Nothing fancy, but solid and spacious. We had been excited the whole day, unpacking boxes, setting up furniture, and finally settling Emma into her nursery. The first few nights were uneventful, except for the usual baby noises. We used a baby monitor so we could hear Emma from the living room. It was one of those simple ones, just audio, nothing fancy. The kind you'd expect in a place where cell service and Wi-Fi were spotty at best. On the third night, Clara was asleep beside me and Emma was in her crib. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when I heard it, a soft knocking sound coming through the baby monitor. It wasn't one of Emma's usual grunts or cries. It was steady, rhythmic, like someone tapping their finger against a wall. At first, I thought maybe it was the pipes or the house settling, but it didn't sound right. I muted the monitor to listen closely, and the knocking kept going, quiet but consistent, like a slow heartbeat. I got up and walked to Emma's room. The walls there were solid concrete. I checked by knocking on them myself. The sound was definitely not coming from the pipes or the floorboards. Clara woke up and rubbed her eyes when I told her, but she brushed it off, probably thinking I was overtired. That night, the knocking continued, always through the monitor, always in the nursery. I sat with Emma, watching her sleep, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. It wasn't from outside. There was no wind, no rain, just an eerie stillness. I looked up at the wall across from the crib, where the knocking seemed loudest. Nothing. Over the next few days, the knocking became more regular. Always the same slow rhythm. Knock, knock, pause, knock, knock. Clara started to notice it too, and looked worried. We tried recording it on our phones, but when we played it back, the knocking wasn't there. Like the sound only existed through the baby monitor. One afternoon, I climbed into the attic to see if something strange was going on inside the walls. I poked around, tapping the concrete walls from above, listening for echoes or hollow spots. Everything felt solid, no strange cavities or openings. That evening, while Clara was feeding Emma, the knocking changed. It got softer and more irregular, almost like it was trying to communicate. I know it sounds crazy, but the pattern shifted, breaking the steady rhythm into something jerky and uneven. I wanted to believe it was just the house, some old wiring or plumbing, but the baby monitor was only audio. It didn't pick up electrical noises like that. Plus, every time the knocking happened, Emma would stir, wake just a little, never crying, just twitching her fingers or blinking her eyes like she was reacting to something I couldn't see. One night, I stayed up late watching the nursery through the monitor. Around 2 a.m., the knocking started again. This time, it was accompanied by a low hum I hadn't noticed before. It was subtle, but when I focused, it was definitely there. Then, without warning, the monitor went dead. The screen went black, the audio cut out. I sat frozen, staring at the blank screen. After a few minutes, the monitor flickered back on, but something was off. The audio was distorted, like the knocking had turned into a deep vibration, pulsing in and out. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped. I could see my breath fogging in the cold air. Emma was quiet, perfectly still. The hum got louder, surrounding me through the monitor. That's when I noticed the wall across from Emma's crib wasn't just concrete anymore. A faint shimmer ran along the surface, like the wall was breathing, pulsing in time with the knocking. I felt like I was losing my mind. I called Clara into the room. She looked at the wall and blinked like she didn't believe what she was seeing. We stayed in the nursery, eyes fixed on the shimmering wall. The knocking slowed, then stopped. The hum faded into silence. The next morning, the wall looked normal, just cold concrete. Clara and I started researching the house's history. We found that it was built on the site of an old Cold War bunker. That explained the concrete walls and the thick insulation, but nothing about the knocking or the shimmer. We called in a contractor to check for wiring or plumbing issues, but they found nothing unusual. The house was solid as a rock. One night, a week later, the knocking returned while we were all asleep. This time, Clara woke up first. She told me the knocking was louder, almost urgent. I went to the nursery, but Emma was gone. I panicked, looking everywhere. Then I heard it, a faint giggle, soft and childlike, coming from behind the shimmering wall. I pressed my hand against the concrete, and suddenly the knocking turned into a steady vibration. The shimmer spread like ripples on a pond. The wall grew warm beneath my palm, then hot. The room blurred around me. My vision tunneled. I felt myself pulled forward, like gravity had shifted. When I came to, I was standing in the nursery again. Emma was back in her crib, peacefully asleep. The wall was just concrete. Clara was awake, sitting in the corner, pale and shaking. We never spoke about what happened next, but after that night, the knocking stopped. The shimmer never returned. The baby monitor worked normally. The house was quiet, but sometimes when I'm alone in the nursery, I swear I can still hear that soft knocking. Just enough to remind me that some things in that house were never meant to be explained. I was driving home late one night from my friend Matt's place in upstate New York. It was early March, cold enough that the roads were slick but not quite icy yet. There wasn't much traffic on the winding back roads I usually took to avoid the highway, so I had my phone plugged into the charger and was catching up with my sister, Jenna. We don't talk often, but when we do, it's usually long conversations about work, old family stuff, or just random nonsense. That night, it was one of those calls. She was telling me about her new job, how her boss was a nightmare, and how she was thinking about quitting. I was half listening, focused on the road, when the call suddenly started cutting out. The signal dropped a few times, and then the call just went dead. But then, right after it ended, I heard breathing on the other end. It wasn't static or a glitch. It was breathing. Slow, deep, deliberate. It was close, like whoever was there was right next to the phone, maybe even holding it up to their mouth. I sat frozen for a moment, gripping the steering wheel tighter, eyes scanning the road ahead. The headlights of my car bounced off the trees lining the narrow road, but there was nothing unusual outside. No cars, no people, just me and the cold night. I tried calling her back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I called again and again. No answer. I figured maybe she dropped the phone or it was a bad connection. Still, that breathing stuck with me. It was too clear to be accidental. I started feeling weird, like something was watching me, but shrugged it off. Maybe it was some prank or a random interference. A few minutes later, about 10 miles down the road, my phone died completely. The battery dropped from 20% to 0 in seconds. I pulled over to the side, switched on the interior light, and checked the phone. It wouldn't turn back on. I tried plugging it into the charger again. Nothing. I sat there in the dark, the engine idling, trying to figure out what was going on. That's when I noticed something strange through the windshield. Above the tree line, the stars seemed off. Not like usual twinkling dots, but like a cluster of white lights pulsing rhythmically. Not blinking like a plane or helicopter, just pulsing like a heartbeat. I blinked a couple of times, thinking maybe it was my eyes playing tricks, but the lights stayed there. I tried to adjust my seat to get a better view, but every time I moved, the lights seemed to shift just enough to disappear behind the trees. I got out of the car, the cold hitting me hard. The road was completely silent except for the crunch of my boots on the gravel shoulder. The pulsing lights were still there, faint but definitely there. I looked up, squinting into the sky. It wasn't a plane, no blinking navigation lights. It wasn't a helicopter. The pattern was too precise, too steady. It was like something was holding still, or maybe hovering. Then, without warning, the lights brightened all at once, flooding the road and the trees with an icy blue glow. I shielded my eyes, heart pounding, as the air around me seemed to thicken, almost humming. I stumbled back toward the car and got inside, locking the doors. The lights outside dimmed, but the hum stayed low and constant. I looked down at the dashboard. The clock was frozen at 11:42 p.m., the exact time when the call had dropped. I tried turning the engine on, but it wouldn't start. The radio and all the electronics were dead. It was like the entire car was shut down. The breathing sound came again, but this time it wasn't through the phone. It was inside the car, faint but unmistakable. Slow, controlled, right behind me. I twisted around in my seat, but no one was there. The windows were fogged over, and I could see my breath misting up the glass. I sat there for what felt like forever, waiting for the hum to fade, for the car to start, for the breathing to stop. Eventually, the lights outside slowly dimmed and disappeared altogether, leaving me in total darkness. The car roared back to life, the dashboard clock blinking and resetting, electronics flickering back on. I didn't wait. I started the engine and drove straight home, my hands shaking on the wheel, eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. When I got inside, I locked every door and window, even though no one was around. The house was warm, quiet. I checked my phone again, still dead. Over the next few days, the phone wouldn't charge or turn on. I bought a new one, but even that acted weird. It kept glitching, freezing on screens with static and faint whispers I couldn't make out. I started hearing that breathing again. At first, only in dreams. Then, sometimes when I was alone in the house, soft, rhythmic, right in my ear. I'd swear it was a person, but no one was there. I tried telling Jenna, but she thought I was stressed or tired. Maybe I was. I started avoiding late-night drives, stayed indoors after dark. I even stopped answering my phone. The weird things kept happening, though. Lights flickering in rooms with no bulbs, strange shadows moving just out of sight, that hum sometimes buzzing low beneath the floorboards. And every time the phone died or the call dropped, the breathing was there. Slow, deliberate, too close. It's been weeks now. The last time I heard the breathing, I was sitting on my porch just before dawn. The sky was cloudy, the air thick with fog. I looked up, half expecting those pulsing lights to return. They didn't. But I still feel like something's out there. Watching. Waiting. Breathing. I was driving home late that night, somewhere on Highway 89 between Lake Tahoe and Truckee. It was one of those cold, clear November evenings, the kind where your breath fogs up the windows even if the heater's on full blast. The road was mostly empty, just me and the dark trees lining both sides, shadows stretching out like fingers. I was tired but didn't want to stop. The sooner I got home, the better. Then, just as I was passing the little turnout near Donner Summit, I saw her, a woman standing by the shoulder, thumb out. She looked soaked through, wearing a soaked jacket and shivering. I almost didn't stop. This stretch is known for sketchy stuff, and I usually avoid picking up strangers, but something about her made me slow down. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, like she really needed help. I pulled over, cracked the window. "Need a ride?" She nodded quickly, getting in without much fuss. "Thank you," she said, her voice low but steady. Her name was Lisa. She didn't say much at first, just stared out the window while I drove. I glanced over a few times. She had those wide, pale eyes like she hadn't slept in days. There was a faint scent I couldn't place, almost like cold metal mixed with something sweet, but I figured it was just the wet clothes or the car. We drove in silence for a while. The heater hummed, and the tires crunched on the gravel shoulder when I adjusted speed. After about 10 minutes, I glanced at the rearview mirror, but she wasn't there. I turned my head. The back seat was empty. I froze, hand gripping the steering wheel harder than I realized. The door was still locked. The light inside the car was dim, but I could see every corner clearly. No sign she'd gotten out. The seatbelt buckle hung idle. The wet jacket she'd thrown on the seat was gone. I blinked, checked again. Nothing, but the smell was still there. That metallic scent, like a faint electric charge mixed with cold iron, lingering in the air where she'd been. I pulled over to the side, heart pounding, looked back at the empty road, the dense trees on both sides, nothing but silence and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. I called out, "Lisa?" My voice cracked. No answer. I unlocked the doors, got out, and circled the car, shining my flashlight down the shoulder. Nothing. No footprints, no jacket, no sign she'd walked away. I got back in, locked the doors, and stared out into the black forest. The air felt thicker, heavier, like something was watching just beyond the tree line. I wanted to call the cops, but didn't know what to say. Picked up a hitchhiker who disappeared into thin air. They'd think I was nuts. I started the car again, hands still shaking. As I pulled back onto the highway, the metallic smell grew stronger for a moment, then faded as quickly as it had come. For the rest of the drive home, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her sitting there, but the back seat stayed empty. I pulled into my driveway at about 1:30 a.m. The house was dark and quiet. I shut off the engine and sat for a minute, trying to process what just happened. I kept smelling that strange, metallic scent in the car, even after I turned off the heater and opened the windows. It was faint, but definitely there. I grabbed a cloth and wiped down the back seat, but it wouldn't go away. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. The next morning I told my sister about it. She just looked at me like I'd lost it, said maybe I was overtired or the stress was getting to me. But I kept thinking about the way Lisa looked, how scared she seemed, like she wasn't just stranded, but running from something. And the smell. That smell. Days later, I found a small patch of wetness on the floor where her feet might have rested. I cleaned it up, but no matter what I did, the metallic scent never completely left the car. Sometimes at night, I swear I can still catch it, faint and cold, like a warning or a reminder. I don't know who Lisa was or where she went, but I'm pretty sure she wasn't just a hitchhiker. I started hiking that morning just before sunrise. It was early May and the air was crisp, maybe a bit too cold for just a long-sleeve shirt. I figured I'd warm up once I got moving. The trailhead was tucked away in the Cascades, not too far from where I grew up, but remote enough that you wouldn't expect many people. That was exactly why I picked it. The plan was simple: hike in, spend some hours alone, then come back before dark. I wasn't carrying a lot. Just a small pack with water, a granola bar, my phone, and a map. I usually didn't bother with the map since I'd been on this trail a couple times, but this time I wanted to be sure. I didn't get far before the woods closed in around me, and the sounds of the road disappeared behind. For the first hour, everything was normal. Birds chirping, the crunch of pine needles underfoot, the occasional squirrel darting away. The trail was narrow, but clear. The trees leaned in, mostly fire and cedar, their branches thick with needles. I stopped once or twice to catch my breath and snap pictures of wildflowers. The sun rose higher, sending pale shafts of light through the canopy. Then I noticed something. I was near a bend in the trail where a large cedar had fallen across the path a few years back. Usually there was a clear way around it, a dirt detour people had worn down. But that morning, it wasn't like that. The branches that blocked the path looked rearranged, like someone had taken them and twisted or broken them in a deliberate pattern, not random damage from weather or animals. The branches formed shapes I couldn't place, jagged lines and angles that felt unnatural. I crouched down, running my fingers over a broken twig. It was fresh. The sap still sticky, but no footprints around, no sign of anyone else coming through recently. Just the smell of pine and moss. That's when I got the first uneasy feeling. Not fear exactly, more like confusion. Like the woods were different than they were supposed to be. I glanced behind me. The forest looked wrong, not just the branches or the broken twigs. The whole scene was off. Trees I'd seen clearly when I passed that way earlier, big old cedars leaning left, were gone. In their place, younger trees grew oddly spaced, their trunks bent and twisted at impossible angles. The moss on the rocks was different, more green, wetter, like it belonged in a rainforest, not this part of the Cascades. I blinked hard, thinking maybe it was light playing tricks. I shook my head, like trying to clear the fogginess in my mind. I took a step back, trying to retrace where I'd come from. The trail was gone. Not just hidden or overgrown, it was like it never existed. I turned fully around, scanning the area, heart starting to beat faster, but still steady. I tried calling out, hello, but the woods swallowed my voice. I reached for my phone. No signal, not even a flicker. I pulled out the map and tried to line up landmarks, but nothing matched. The trees I knew, the rock formations, the slope of the hill, all wrong. It was like I was somewhere else entirely, inside a forest that looked like mine, but wasn't. I walked in the direction I thought was back, but after 10 minutes, I saw the same patterns of broken branches and twisted trees again. No trail, no sign of human passage. It started to feel like the forest itself was watching me, or maybe guiding me somewhere I didn't want to go. I stopped, took a deep breath. Then I heard it. A faint humming, low and steady, coming from deeper in the woods. Not natural, but not mechanical either. More like a vibration in the air. I thought about turning around, but didn't know which way that was anymore. The humming grew louder, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Then I noticed the light. It wasn't the sun. It was a pale white glow hovering behind a cluster of trees up ahead. No flames, no flicker, just steady, unnatural light. Something made me move toward it, but my feet felt heavy, like I was sinking into the soil. The branches around me began to feel sticky, like cobwebs catching on my jacket. The closer I got, the colder the air became, even though the sun was shining above the canopy. My breath was visible, thin clouds in the middle of the morning. The light was so bright now I had to squint. It hovered maybe 10 feet off the ground. The shape was vague, like a cloud of mist that held a form, an oval, almost egg-shaped, but shimmering and shifting. I reached out, almost touching it, and then everything went silent. No birds, no wind, no humming. The light blinked off. The forest snapped back into normal. The trail was there. I was standing exactly where I'd been hours before, the cedar tree fallen across the path just as I remembered it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked, full signal. I walked out without looking back, heart pounding but face dry. When I got home, Katie asked if I had fun. I told her, yeah. That night, I checked my phone. The battery was low, even though I'd charged it before I left. And there was a new photo in my gallery. Not one I'd taken. It was that light. The pale, shifting shape hovering just above the ground. I don't know how it got there. I don't know why I still have it. I haven't gone back. The forest looks normal from the road, but sometimes when the wind shifts just right, I swear I hear that humming again. It started sometime in March. I wasn't sleeping well to begin with. Stress, work, whatever. I'd go to bed around 10, then just lie there for hours. And when I did fall asleep, it was always the same dream. I was floating, not flying, not falling, just suspended like my body wasn't mine. I couldn't move, couldn't turn my head or wiggle my fingers. I was face up, weightless, like I was underwater, but there was no pressure, no sound. Just this sterile, bright space that seemed to stretch out in every direction. The ceiling, if you could call it that, looked like glowing panels, almost like a hospital, but too clean, too symmetrical. Every time I felt like I was being looked at. I couldn't see anyone, but I knew there were things near me. Sometimes I'd catch shadows in the edge of my vision, tall shapes, unmoving. They never touched me, but I always woke up with this electric tension in my jaw, like I'd been clenching all night. I live in a duplex outside of Boise. Suburban edge of town, quiet street. I'm on the left side and my neighbor Glenn lives on the right. We mostly just say hi when bringing the garbage out. I only mention him because of what happened later. The dreams went on every night for almost 2 weeks. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was scared, just because it sounded ridiculous. I figured maybe it was sleep paralysis or some new kind of insomnia. But I started noticing other things. Lights flickering, always in the hallway. The bulb in the ceiling fixture would dim for a second, just barely, like a power dip, but it never happened during the day, only at night, only after the dream. and there were these little scratches near the baseboards in my bedroom. Not like animal scratches, I don't have pets, but faint, evenly spaced marks running parallel along the wall, maybe 6 inches from the floor. I tried cleaning them off with a Mr. Clean pad, but they didn't go away. Then there was the noise. I'd wake up sometime between 2 and 3 a.m., lying on my side, and hear this low hum. Not outside, not from the heater or fridge. It was like it was in the air. You could almost feel it more than hear it. Not loud, but constant, like a tuning fork pressed to bone. It made my teeth feel weird. One night I woke up and realized I was lying perfectly flat, arms at my sides, palms down. That's not how I sleep. I always curl up or flip to my stomach. But this time I was just laid out like a plank, eyes wide open, the ceiling light bulb flickering slightly. That hum was louder than usual, almost vibrating the pillow. I sat up fast, heart pounding. The noise stopped, the light stabilized. I didn't go back to sleep. A couple mornings later, I was outside watering the small planter by the driveway, and Glenn came out to grab his paper. He looked like hell, pale, sweaty, dark rings under his eyes. "Rough night?" I asked. He paused, then kind of laughed, but not in a funny way. "You ever have, like, really vivid dreams?" he said. That made my stomach twist. I asked what he meant. "Floating," he said, "every night for the past couple weeks. Bright white room. Can't move. Just floating. Something's always there, but I can't see it. I don't know how to explain it. I keep waking up feeling wrong." I didn't say anything. I must have just stared at him too long, because then he shook his head and said, "Forget it," and turned to go back inside. I followed him, put my hand on his shoulder, told him I'd had the exact same dream. He froze, then sat down on the steps and started crying, like full-on sobbing. I didn't know what to do, just sat beside him and waited. Eventually, he said, "I thought I was losing my mind." He told me about the hum, the static in the walls, the way his clocks kept blinking like the power had gone out, except they were on separate circuits. He'd woken up in the backyard once, barefoot, no coat, freezing, had no idea how he got there. That night we made a plan. Nothing dramatic, just decided we'd both try to stay awake and see if anything happened. Glenn had an old security camera he used to point at his driveway. He said he'd set it up facing his bed. I downloaded a sleep tracking app that took audio recordings whenever it detected noise. We each took half a melatonin, stayed up watching a movie, then went to our own sides around midnight. I didn't remember falling asleep. I just remember being in that same blank space, stiff and paralyzed, staring upward. I wanted to scream, but my jaw wouldn't work. I couldn't even blink. Something tall moved past me, not walking, but gliding. And then the hum ramped up until it wasn't sound anymore, just pure pressure behind my eyes. When I woke up, the sun was already up. 9:30 a.m., I grabbed my phone and opened the sleep app. It had one recording, time-stamped 3:17 a.m. I hit play. It was silent for a few seconds, then there was a metallic click. Then a low, rising hum, same as the one I'd heard before, but louder, more layered. Then a soft voice, but not in English. I couldn't even tell if it was a language. It sounded like whispers run backward through a synth. Then the file just cut off. I ran next door. Glenn opened the door already pale. He didn't sleep either. He said he came to on the floor of his kitchen, shirt inside out. He hadn't been drinking. The camera in his bedroom had turned itself off at 3:16 a.m., but it did save one frame, a still shot. It was mostly dark, just grain from the infrared sensor. But you could see his bed, empty. The covers were pulled down neatly. In the corner of the frame, there was a shape, not a person, too thin, too tall. The top of its head was flat, no facial features. The arms were long and slightly bent. It was in the room, but it looked wrong, like it wasn't fully there, like it was bleeding through or glitching. We stared at that image for a long time. Then Glenn deleted it. We didn't talk much after that. We still wave, still say hi, but we don't bring it up. I haven't had the dream since the last time. Neither has he. But the hum comes back sometimes. Always for just a second, like just as I'm drifting off, like a reminder. My wife, Becca, and I have a little cabin in northern Minnesota. Not full-time, it's just a place we go on weekends when we can. It's out past two harbors, tucked into the woods off a dirt road that barely shows up on GPS. My dad and I built it when I was 20, mostly as a hunting shack, but we fixed it up over the years, insulated it, added solar, got a little well pump going, real basic, but cozy. We don't get cell service out there. That's part of the appeal. This happened last September. It was one of the last weekends before the weather turned. Leaves were already changing, cold at night but warm during the day. We drove up Friday after work, arrived a little after dark. I got the fire going while Becca unpacked groceries. Same routine as always. That night, we were sitting out on the porch, just listening. The woods up there get quiet in a way you don't get near town. No traffic, no dogs barking, just wind in the trees, the occasional owl. But around 11, we started hearing something else. Not animal sounds, more like snapping, like someone stepping on sticks, then stopping, then another snap, maybe 50 feet away. I stood up and shone the flashlight around, but we didn't see anything. I figured maybe a deer or porcupine. But Becca got nervous. She hates not knowing what's out there, so I walked the tree line with the light. Didn't find anything, but the feeling stuck with us, like something was watching. The next morning, we found our trail cam in the dirt. We'd set it up a few weeks before to see what kind of wildlife came through. It was one of those motion-triggered ones, strapped to a birch about 15 feet from the cabin. It hadn't fallen, the strap had been unbuckled, like someone had taken it off on purpose and just dropped it. I figured it was a bear. They're curious, maybe it pawed at the latch, but there were no scratches, no mud, no teeth marks. The camera wasn't even dirty. We brought it inside, turned it on, battery was fine, storage card was full, so I plugged it into my laptop. There were 86 clips from that night. The first few were what you'd expect, trees moving, a rabbit hopping by, nothing weird. But then at 11:13 p.m., the screen went black. Not like darkness, more like corrupted video. Static bars, weird pixelation, total nonsense. That lasted through clip after clip, nearly 2 hours of unreadable footage. Except for one. It was maybe 30 seconds long. Time-stamped 12:42 a.m. It looked like it was shot inside the cabin. It was our bed. I recognized the flannel sheets, the old headboard. Becca and I were both asleep. The angle was low from the foot of the bed, like the camera had been placed on the floor. We weren't moving, just breathing slow like we were out cold. And behind the camera, barely visible at the top edge of the frame, there was something standing, just a sliver of it. Not the whole shape. You could see what looked like ears curled around the top of the camera, long and pale. They weren't human. The joints bent wrong. There were too many of them. I scrubbed the timeline back and forth. No sound, no movement. Just that one still frame, like the video froze. Then the file ended. I didn't show Becca right away. I closed the laptop, made up some excuse about the footage being corrupted. But she could tell something was wrong. That afternoon, she found the file and watched it herself. I heard her in the bedroom. She didn't scream or anything, just went totally silent. When I came in, she was already packing. We left within the hour. Didn't even lock up. Just drove back to Duluth and stayed at her sister's place. For a few days, we didn't talk about it. Neither of us wanted to bring it up. But then the dreams started. I'd wake up with this buzzing in my head, like low static. Couldn't remember what I'd been dreaming, just felt like I hadn't slept. Once I woke up standing in the hallway, still holding my pillow. Another time I had mud on my feet. No idea how it got there. Becca had it worse. She started getting nosebleeds at night. Always between 2 and 3 a.m. She'd wake up dizzy, arms numb. One time she swore she saw light coming in through the ceiling. Like a flashlight, but bluish and totally silent. I told her we needed to see a doctor. She said she didn't want to, that she knew it wouldn't help. I finally went back up to the cabin 2 weeks later. Alone. I needed to see if someone had broken in. Maybe a prank or a break-in. That's what I told myself. The front door was still locked. Nothing inside was touched. No broken windows. No signs of animals. The weird part was the trail cam was back on the tree. Same strap, same height, just reattached like it had never been moved. But the SD card was missing. I looked for hours, dug through the grass, checked the cabin, even pulled apart the firewood stack. Nothing. When I left, I got this tight pressure behind my eyes, like a sinus headache, but worse. It stayed with me the whole drive home. Only went away when I crossed back onto the highway. We haven't gone back since. The cabin's still there, far as I know. I check the weather station online sometimes, and the power's still working. Solar's charging, but we don't talk about it anymore. The laptop we used, the one with the video files, stopped booting a few months later. I brought it to a shop and they said the hard drive had been wiped. No idea how. I don't know what we saw in that video. I don't know what was in our room or how the camera got in there. But the angle was too low for a person standing. And whatever those fingers were, they weren't human. They were something else. I parked at the trailhead around 6:30 that evening. Didn't feel like hiking in the dark, so I figured I'd crash in the car and head out early. It was one of those free backcountry spots. Just a gravel pull-off with a wooden kiosk and a pit toilet a little ways up the hill. No cell service, no other cars. Closest paved road was 10 miles behind me. I'd done that loop a couple times. Flat Creek Trail, northern Arizona, about 26 miles round trip, but never in late fall. The temp had dropped quicker than I expected once the sun went down. By 9, I was already zipped up in my bag in the back of my Subaru, watching my breath fog up the windows. It wasn't a peaceful night. I kept hearing little sounds that didn't add up. Tiny scuffs and crunches outside, not constant, but spaced out just enough to keep me from drifting off. Mice, probably. Or a raccoon. At some point I fell asleep anyway. I woke up the first time around 1:40 a.m., give or take. It wasn't a noise that woke me. It was this weird pressure in my head. Like when you drive over a mountain pass and your ears don't pop right. That, and I realized I wasn't breathing through my nose. My sinuses felt full. I sat up halfway and tried to clear them, but it didn't help. Then came the knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not hard, not fast. Just tap, tap, tap. Right above me on the roof of the car, I froze. Thought maybe a branch had fallen on top, except I'd parked in a clearing. Nothing overhead. I waited. 10 seconds later, same 3 knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I held my breath and stayed still. A minute passed. Nothing. Then 3 more knocks. Same exact rhythm. I slid my hand down to the zipper on the sleeping bag and started to ease it open. Every few minutes, the sound would come again. Always 3. Always slow. I never heard any shifting, no scuffling on the metal, no leaves falling, just that knock pattern. Again and again, spaced out like clockwork. It went on for hours. I didn't sleep again. Eventually, the light outside started to change. Pale gray-blue creeping around the edges of the windows. I waited another 10 minutes before I moved. Quietly unzipped the back hatch and slipped out in my socks, crouched low. I circled the car. Nothing around. No footprints. No drag marks. Ground was soft with that powdery, dry red dust. Perfect for picking up prints. Not a single one except mine. I finally stood up and looked at the roof. The whole middle section was dented inward. Like something heavy, really heavy, had stood on it. The center was bowed down maybe 2 inches, and the metal looked bruised. Not scraped or punctured, just warped, like it had been holding weight for a long time. But no claw marks, no bird crap, no dirt, just warped metal and dust undisturbed all around it. I stood there a long time. Eventually I climbed up on the bumper to get a better look. The dents weren't shaped like feet or anything, just a broad depression about 3 feet across, centered directly over the middle of the car. I pressed my hand to the roof, cold, but normal. No stickiness, no residue. Just wrong. I skipped the hike, drove straight back to Flagstaff. The pressure in my head eased up as soon as I hit pavement. I kept checking the rear view like I expected to see something following me. That night, I parked in my driveway under a bright streetlight and didn't go inside for a while. Just sat there, staring at the warping in the roof, still dented like it hadn't shifted an inch. I live on a quiet street, no big trucks, no low-hanging branches. I couldn't stop thinking about how heavy that thing must have been to do that, and how quiet. I asked a friend who's a mechanic to look at the roof a few days later. Didn't tell him anything. He poked around and said it looked like settling under weight, but he couldn't figure out how. No corrosion, no sharp impact, just a slow, even pressure. He asked if I'd parked under a snowbank or a load of bricks or something. I didn't answer, just said I must have missed something. That was 3 weeks ago. The dent's still there. I don't sleep in the car anymore. It was around 2:45 in the morning, somewhere off Route 287 in Wyoming. I'd been hauling a load of lumber from Missoula down to Amarillo, and I was planning to stop at a rest area just south of Rawlins. But the fog rolled in thicker than I'd ever seen. It wasn't like the light stuff you usually get up in the mountains. This was heavy, low, and choking, like smoke, but cold. The road just disappeared 20 feet ahead of me. My high beams did nothing. I slowed way down, like 25 miles an hour, hazards on. Normally I don't stop unless I have to, but something about that fog made my skin crawl. The CB was dead silent too. No chatter, no truckers complaining about the weather. That was weird. You usually hear someone. Even the radio just spat static, no matter the station. I kept driving. About 5 miles later, I saw him. There was a man standing on the center line, completely naked, arms hanging limp at his sides, pale as paper. He wasn't moving, just staring straight up into the fog, head tilted back so far I thought his neck might snap. I barely saw him in time to stop. Slammed the brakes. My trailer fishtailed a little but stayed in line. I sat there for a second, foot shaking on the brake. He didn't move. I thought maybe he was high or in shock, maybe wrecked a car I hadn't seen, but there weren't any tire tracks, no hazards flashing in the fog, no other lights at all. Just me, my truck idling in the middle of nowhere, and this guy staring into nothing. I cracked the window, called out to him. No response. That should have been enough for me to stay in the cab, but I didn't. I grabbed my flashlight, climbed down, and started walking toward him. The air was dead quiet. I mean, dead. No wind, no crickets, no distant hum from my truck, just silence and fog. When I got about 10 feet away, I stopped. His eyes were wide open, mouth closed, jaw slack, chest not moving. He didn't even flinch when I called out again. Then he slowly lowered his head and looked at me. Not at me, more like through me. I said, "Hey man, are you all right? You need help?" And stepped a little closer, shining the light at his feet. No shoes. Toes dirty, but not bloody. Just standing there like he'd been dropped out of the sky. Then he opened his mouth. Not fast. Just unhinged his jaw like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. Not even a breath. It wasn't like he was mute or choking. It was like the air around us was broken, like sound couldn't happen. And then everything went dark. Not blink out dark. Just sudden, like a switch flipped. I didn't pass out. I didn't feel dizzy or fall. I was just somewhere else the next second. When I came to, I was back in the cab of my truck, parked on the shoulder. Sun was rising, no fog, no man, engine off, no memory of pulling over or turning anything off. I checked my logbook. I'd lost about 4 hours. My coffee thermos was still sitting in the cup holder, full and cold. My phone was dead, even though it had been at 60% before. The CB was working again. I flipped through channels and heard guys bitching about cattle backups near Casper. I climbed down and walked the length of the truck, checking everything. No damage. No sign I'd jackknifed or gone off-road. Tires clean. Trailer locked up fine. But the dust on the driver's door handle was gone, like someone had wiped it clean. I didn't see another car for 20 minutes after I started driving again. When I did, it was just a beat-up sedan heading north. Guy inside didn't even look my way. That whole stretch of road looked normal in the daylight. No tire marks, no signs of anyone walking the shoulder, no blood, no clothes, no footprints. When I made it to Amarillo, I went straight to the yard and dropped the trailer, called in the delivery, filed everything as usual. Didn't say anything to dispatch about the gap in time. They didn't question it. Sometimes delays happen. That was in 2017. I've taken that route maybe a dozen times since, and I still slow down near that stretch. I can't remember the exact mile marker. Every time I try to pin it down, it feels wrong, like I'm thinking about someone else's dream. But I never drive it in the dark anymore. It started with a voicemail from my brother, Alex. I was brushing my teeth when it came in, around 1:40 a.m. I didn't see it until morning. The transcript on my phone just said, "They're here. They're outside the tent." I don't. Then it cut off. The audio was worse. I played it on speaker first, then with headphones, just to be sure. His voice was low and fast, like he was whispering, but panicked, trying to keep quiet. "Katie, I don't know what's going on. They're here. They're right outside the tent. I can see shadows. then just rustling, some kind of soft popping sound, then silence. No wind, no footsteps, just a few seconds of nothing before it ended. I called him immediately, straight to voicemail. I tried again and again while I got dressed, while I grabbed my keys, while I drove over to his apartment. It was only 10 minutes away. His Subaru was gone. The neighbor said he'd left Friday night, mentioned something about Linville Gorge. That matched what he'd told me earlier in the week. Just a solo weekend hike before the fall crowds hit. He'd picked a spot off the East Rim, past the Table Rock trailhead. No service out there. I figured the voicemail had gotten stuck in the queue and finally delivered once he hit signal. Except it wasn't Sunday morning. It was Tuesday. The voicemail was timestamped Monday at 1:42 a.m. I called the park office, then the sheriff's department. A ranger named Reyes met me at the visitor center. I gave her all the info I had, showed her the voicemail. She didn't say much, just wrote down the coordinates Alex had texted me before he left. They found his campsite that evening. It was in a flat little clearing, maybe half a mile from the main trail, tucked behind a boulder outcropping. His tent was there, staked clean and tight, pack propped against a tree, food bags strung up like it should be. Not a single branch disturbed, no drag marks, no torn gear, no blood, just the tent. The zipper was fused shut, not jammed, not broken, melted. Like someone had taken a soldering iron to the teeth and welded the coils together in one long, sealed line. I wasn't allowed to see it in person, but Reyes showed me photos. You could see the plastic distorted, warped into hard ridges and glossy dips like cooled candle wax. No scorch marks, no burn pattern, just heat deformation. Tent fabric intact. They cut it open from the side. Inside was empty. Sleeping bag rolled out, flashlight still clipped to the mesh pocket, boots lined up just inside the door. A folded map with a Sharpie-marked route across the Linville River. Everything in order. No sign of a struggle. Just no Alex. They logged it as a missing persons case. That should have been the end of it, but 3 days later I got another voicemail. This time it came in at 4:09 a.m. Same number. Still listed under Alex. I was already awake. Couldn't sleep. I grabbed my phone the second it buzzed, but when I answered, no one was there. Just the call ending, followed by a new message alert. I hit play. It started the same way. Shuffling sounds, then Alex's voice. Slower this time, slurred. I'm not where I was. The trees are gone. I don't know. Katie, I'm not on the mountain anymore. There was a long pause. Then he said something I couldn't make out. It sounded like, no sky here. Then a sound I can't describe. Not static, not distortion, just a tone. A pressure, like something pressing down through the speaker. Then the message ended. I forwarded it to the ranger. Reyes called me an hour later, asked where I got it. I told her it came from his number, same as before. She said that wasn't possible. His phone had been found at the campsite. Still in the mesh pocket, battery dead. She asked if I still had the audio. I said yes. She asked if she could come pick it up, not email it, pick it up. I said sure. She never showed. Later that night, I listened to it again. This time, I plugged the phone into my laptop, opened a waveform editor I used for work. I wanted to isolate the background sounds. When I expanded the timeline, I saw something weird in the middle, a blocky section, almost uniform. No visible variation in the waveform, just a smooth wall of noise. I boosted the gain, cleaned up the background. There was something underneath. Not a voice exactly, more like breathing, but mechanical, layered, in and out at the same time. And there was a clicking, like wet fingers tapping glass. The file corrupted while I was editing it. Whole thing went gray, wouldn't play. Laptop crashed. I don't have the recording anymore. That was 2 years ago. The case is still technically open. They never found a body, never found tracks. No one else camping in that area reported anything unusual, except one group, a couple from Durham, who later told me their dog had gone nuts around 2 a.m., barking at the tree line. Wouldn't calm down until morning. They were camped about a mile from where Alex had pitched his tent. I asked if they heard anything else. The woman said she remembered something strange around that time, a weird stillness. No crickets, no breeze, just total silence for a few minutes, like the woods had been paused. Then it all came back at once, like flipping a switch. They didn't think much of it until I asked. I've stopped telling people the full story. Most think he wandered off, maybe got hurt, maybe animal activity. I've read all the missing hiker theories. I've heard it all. But I know what I heard in his voice. He wasn't lost. He was watching something outside his tent, and whatever it was, it didn't want the zipper opened. I woke up at 2:13 a.m. because of the dogs. They usually don't bark at night unless something's really off. We get coyotes now and then, but they'll yap and pace if that's the case. This was different. Short, clipped barks, then silence, then one of them let out this weird half growl, half whimper like it didn't know whether to be afraid or aggressive. I got up, put on my boots without socks, grabbed the flashlight off the windowsill. I live on 38 acres about 20 minutes outside of Mason City, Iowa. It's mostly pasture, with a little patch of timber on the north end, barn on the east side, house tucked back from the gravel drive. No neighbors in sight, just sky and corn and cows. When I stepped outside, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No crickets, no wind. Even the trees behind the barn weren't moving. It was dead still. I aimed the flashlight toward the paddock where the cattle usually huddled together at night. They weren't there. Then I saw the glow. Not from the barn itself, above it, hanging maybe 50, 60 feet over the roof. It was white, but not like a spotlight or a floodlight. It pulsed, not fast, but steady, on, off, each pulse about 3 seconds apart. No beam, just the glow hanging there like a jellyfish suspended in the air. I turned off my flashlight and just watched. I didn't move for what felt like a minute, maybe longer. The air had that charged feeling, like right before a thunderstorm, but there were no clouds, just stars behind that pulsing white light. Then I noticed the cows. They were in the front pasture, just past the gravel. I hadn't seen them at first because of the hill between the yard and the drive. All 23 of them, standing in a perfect circle. Perfect, equal spacing between each one, every single one of them facing outward, away from the center, toward the fields. Heads up. Still. I walked closer. They didn't react to me. No shifting, no snorting, just statues. My flashlight was still off, but the glow from the thing above the barn lit the scene better than any full moon. Their shadows stretched long and thin across the ground, all pointed outward in that same circle shape. I don't remember making a decision to move, but I found myself walking down the gravel toward the barn. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't scared exactly, more like confused, out of step with things. Like the timing was wrong. When I got closer to the barn, the light above it pulsed faster. Still silent, no humming, just this soft, thick on-off rhythm like breathing. I got within maybe 20 yards before something in my head just shut off. Not sleep, not passing out. It felt like someone skipping ahead in a video. I blinked and I was standing in the same place except the light was gone. Just black sky now. No pulsing. No movement. And I was cold. Really cold. I looked down at my flashlight. It was still in my hand, but the rubber grip was covered in dew. My shirt was damp. The toes of my boots were soaked. I walked back to the house. My legs felt stiff, like I'd been standing for hours. The dogs were inside, both curled up behind the wood stove. They didn't get up when I came in. I looked at the wall clock. It said 8:24. I checked my wristwatch. 8:24. It had said 2:13 when I got up. That whole chunk of time, 6 hours, just gone. I hadn't gone inside, hadn't sat down, hadn't done anything but walk from the porch to the pasture. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window while the sun started to rise. I could still see the cows. They hadn't moved. Same circle, same stance. Around 8:45, they broke off one by one. No noise, no panic, just walking away like nothing had happened. By 9, they were all grazing again like normal. I went out and checked the barn. Nothing out of place. Tools on the hooks, feed bin shut, no burn marks on the roof or the ground. But the grass where the circle had been, where the cows stood, was matted down. Not trampled, just flat. Even. Like it had been pressed. I didn't tell anybody that day. A week later, I noticed something else. My watch was running 6 hours fast every morning. Only in the morning. I'd reset it, wear it all day, check it before bed, fine. But when I woke up, it would be 6 hours ahead. Exactly 6. Not 5 and change, not drifting. Just skipped forward. I stopped wearing it. Eventually, I sold the cows. Couldn't look at them the same. They'd line up along the fence sometimes and just stare toward the barn at dusk. I keep the pasture empty now, just hay. Nothing else has happened since, but I've taped over the clock in the kitchen. I don't like seeing that time. The night we were driving home from the lake, everything felt off from the start. It was early September, cool and clear, and the kind of quiet that settles deep in the woods around Rockbridge County. I was with 3 friends, Mark, Jess, and Eric, just finishing a weekend camping trip. We were packed tight in Mark's old Jeep, rolling down County Road 13, heading back to town. It was just past 4 a.m. when we saw it. Up ahead, right in the middle of the narrow stretch, a deer stood perfectly still. Not like the usual frozen in fear kind you sometimes catch on the road, but like someone had paused a video. It wasn't blinking, breathing, or twitching. Its eyes were open, fixed on us, but there was no movement at all. I mean, I've seen deer stand still before, but never like that. It was the kind of still that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. Mark slowed the Jeep and flicked the headlights back and forth, trying to catch any sign of movement. The rest of us were quiet, just watching. Then the air changed. It was subtle, but you could feel it. The sound of the engine faded, the tires stopped crunching the gravel, even the wind seemed to die down. For a moment, maybe 10 seconds, it was like the whole world held its breath. Even our voices felt far away, like they were underwater. Jess whispered, "What the hell?" Then everything snapped back. The deer was gone. We all stared at the empty road. No rustling bushes, no running figure, nothing. Just empty blacktop and the fog rolling low over the shoulder of the road. The headlights caught nothing. That's when we noticed our watches. All of them. Mark's digital, Jess's smartwatch, Eric's old analog, and mine showed the same time, 4:17 a.m. The exact same time. We hadn't moved. Nothing had changed around us except the deer vanished and the time jumped forward. I swear, we all checked twice because it made no sense. I looked at the dashboard clock. Same time. We'd been staring at that deer for at least a minute, maybe more, but the clock was frozen at 4:17. Mark shifted the Jeep into drive and started moving slowly again, but the woods were unnervingly quiet. Usually at that hour, you'd hear crickets or a distant owl. Nothing. Just silence. Jess broke it, voice shaky. "Did that deer just disappear?" Eric laughed nervously. Maybe it was a hologram or something, like one of those prank things. But no one really sounded convinced. About a minute later, the engine sputtered and died. We all looked at each other, feeling the weird tension creep up again. Mark tried the ignition. Nothing. The Jeep was dead. We were stuck in the middle of nowhere at 4:17 a.m. with no cell signal and no idea why. That's when the lights started. A soft glow from the tree line, low to the ground, but moving fast. They weren't like car lights or flashlights, more like those weird Christmas lights that don't blink normally but pulse softly, almost alive. They slid between the trees toward us, casting long shadows. We all froze. The headlights were off now. We didn't want to spook whatever it was. The glow got closer until it was just beyond the edge of the Jeep. Mark fumbled for his phone to get a flashlight, but the screen was dead, black and unresponsive. Jess whispered, "What is that?" I swear the air felt thicker, like breathing underwater. The glow suddenly shot upward, brighter and bigger, like a balloon of light swelling fast. The trees lit up in white and blue tones, and a humming filled the air, low but vibrating. It didn't hurt or scare me outright, but it made my skin crawl. The light formed into a shape, kind of like a dome or a shell, but shifting like liquid metal. It hovered maybe 20 feet above the ground, right over the spot where the deer had been. Then the humming stopped. We all looked around and everything was still again, except for the time. Our watches now said 4:17 exactly. Again. Mark checked his phone one last time. Still dead. I blinked and suddenly we were outside the Jeep, not walking, but standing near the edge of the road. No one said anything at first. Jess was the first to break it, voice shaking. Did we just get moved?" Eric looked around, his face pale. "What the hell just happened?" I ran a hand through my hair and looked back at the spot where the light had been. The road was clean and dry, no footprints or marks. The trees looked untouched, like nothing had been there at all. Mark tried the ignition again, and the Jeep roared back to life. We climbed back in, and the moment the engine kicked on, the lights vanished, like someone switched off a lamp. The radio static came back, and the usual dawn birds started calling. We looked at each other, still processing. Driving back, None of us said much. The forest was waking up around us, birds chirping, leaves rustling with the morning breeze. When we got to town, the clocks on the dashboard, our phones, even the gas station clock, all read 4:17. We compared notes later, trying to piece it together. None of us could explain how we'd lost time, or how the deer disappeared or what those lights really were. But it all centered on that frozen moment on the road. Something paused, something watched, and somehow we ended up exactly where we started, except none of our watches moved forward for hours. I still think about it when I'm driving late, and I wonder if that's just how time works sometimes, or if something else was there in the woods that night, just waiting. But none of us ever saw that deer again. It started the summer I turned 17. We lived in a farmhouse about 20 minutes outside Lincoln, Nebraska. Not the middle of nowhere, but close. Our back property bordered this big cornfield that belonged to the Brenners, who leased out their land every season. Real tall, thick stuff. You couldn't see more than a foot in once it hit full height. No trails, no gaps, just this wall of green that started maybe 20 feet behind our yard. The first time I heard it, it was around 10 p.m. I was out on the back steps messing with my phone, just killing time before bed. It was quiet, no wind, no cars on the road. You get used to that kind of stillness living out here. Then I heard it. Caleb. My name. Not shouted, more like spoken clearly from a distance. I froze. It came from the field, like maybe 15 feet in, just past the first couple rows. It didn't sound panicked or anything, just normal. The weird part? It was my voice. Not kind of like me, not similar. It was me. The tone, the rhythm, even the way I say my name, a little flat, like I don't care much. I stood up and looked, but it was dark and the porch light only went so far. The corn just stood there. Nothing moved. I waited a bit. Nothing else. Then I went inside and told myself it was some weird echo thing, or maybe just my imagination. Went to bed. The next night it happened again. Same time, same voice. Caleb. This time it was quieter. Not like it was farther, like it was holding back. Still definitely me. I said, hello, back into the dark, feeling stupid immediately. No answer. I stood there a minute, then backed into the house and locked the door. My parents were already asleep. I didn't wake them. I didn't tell anyone about it for a week. It kept happening, though. Not every night. Just often enough that I started waiting for it. Always around the same time. Always my voice. Caleb. One night I recorded with my phone while I sat on the steps. Waited 20 minutes. Heard nothing. I gave up and started heading in, and then heard it again, just as I reached for the handle. Spun around, nothing but corn and quiet. I played back the recording, nothing on it. After that, I started dreading the nights. I'd pretend to be asleep by 10 so my parents wouldn't ask questions. But I couldn't stop listening for it. Even with my window shut, I swore I heard it faintly from downstairs or the edge of the yard. Always just one word. Caleb. After about 10 days, I broke down and told my friend Marcus. He came over the next night, stayed late. We sat on the back steps and waited, talking about random stuff to pass the time. He didn't believe me, but he was curious enough to stick it out. Then it came. Caleb. He jerked like someone had goosed him. What the hell was that? He whispered. Me, I said. No, seriously, that was your voice. I nodded. We stared at the corn. It was too dark to see past the first couple rows. Marcus whispered, say something back. I didn't. He elbowed me. Finally, I said, who's there? Nothing. We waited. Nothing else came. After 5 minutes, Marcus stood up and said, screw this. He grabbed the flashlight from his bag and pointed it into the field. I told him not to go in. He did anyway. Walked maybe 6 feet into the corn, light cutting through in a narrow beam. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him moving. Then he stopped walking and he said, Caleb? But it wasn't the right tone. Not surprised or questioning, it was flat, neutral. Then I heard movement again, but it was coming toward me from deeper in the corn. I yelled his name. No answer. The flashlight beam jittered, then blinked out completely. I panicked and ran for the edge, calling out, nearly tripping over the stalks. About 10 feet in, I found Marcus crouched low, breathing hard. The flashlight was off in the dirt next to him. He looked up at me and said, I heard it too. It copied me. We didn't say much else that night. He left right after and didn't come back for a while. The next morning, I woke up early and looked out at the field. There were footprints in the dirt, mine and Marcus's where we'd stepped in. But farther in, leading deeper into the corn, there was another trail. Bare feet, longer strides, no shoes. Deep impressions like it had more weight than it should. And the path just ended, like it kept going, but there were no prints coming back out. I showed my dad. He said it was probably just kids screwing around. But he didn't go in to check, and he didn't like that I was out there at night. Told me to leave it alone. That night, I didn't go outside. I locked the back door and kept my lights off. But around 10:15, I heard the voice again. Through the window, behind my bed. Caleb. It was louder than before, close, like it was just outside the house. I crawled across the floor and peeked through the blinds. There was no one there, just moonlight and grass. The cornfield stood still. I stayed up the whole night, listening. Next morning, I found more prints. This time they went around the back of the house. They stopped right below my window. I stopped sleeping after that. My mom thought I was stressing about school or something and started making me drink sleepy time tea every night. I poured it down the drain and pretended. The voice came again that Friday. Multiple times. Caleb? Caleb. Caleb. Always with the exact same tone. Always from the field. Then it said something different. Come see. That broke me. I couldn't pretend anymore. I told my parents everything. They looked concerned, then tried to convince me it was just stress, hence maybe dreams I was remembering wrong. My dad checked the backyard with his old hunting rifle, walked the edge of the corn, came back 15 minutes later and said it was clear. I asked if he saw the footprints. He didn't answer. The next few nights were quiet. No voice, no sounds, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept all the curtains closed, put stuff in front of the doors, slept during the day, if at all. Then one night, something changed. I woke up at 3 a.m. to light filling my room, soft and white like a spotlight filtered through mist. No sound, no hum, just pressure like the air had thickened. I got up and looked out. The backyard was glowing, like fog lit from above. The cornfield looked silver. I stared hard at it. There were figures standing just inside the first row, not moving, lined up evenly across the edge, too tall, too thin. Their heads were wrong, long in the back like they sloped backward. No eyes that I could see, just smooth ovals. I shut the curtain, backed away. When I looked again, the light was gone. The next morning, the prints were back. Dozens of them. Bare feet, long strides, circling the house. I asked my dad if he'd seen anything weird. He told me the trail cam on the shed got knocked over in the night. Claimed maybe a raccoon did it. But when I asked to see the footage, he just shook his head and said the card had been wiped. That was when I knew they weren't telling me everything. I started keeping a knife under my pillow, not because I thought it would help, just so I'd feel less helpless. I stopped going outside at all. But it didn't stop. Last time it happened was 2 weeks ago. I was in bed, headphones on, pretending to sleep. Lights off. It was almost 10:30. Then I felt something shift, like pressure on the floorboards. A creak. I sat up and pulled the headphones off. The voice came from inside the house this time. Caleb, my voice, from the hallway. I grabbed the knife and cracked the door. Hall was dark. Nothing there. Then I heard it again, this time from downstairs. Caleb, come see. The lights flickered once, then held steady. I waited an hour before leaving my room, found nothing out of place. Front door locked. Back door too. But the sliding glass door in the dining room, it was open, just an inch. And outside in the dirt, only one set of footprints this time. Mine. Going out, none coming back.